A white-haired man stops and looks ahead, where someone is raising a crown. Kneeling before him is the arrogant king of humanity, begging forgiveness for all his crimes, surrendering his throne in exchange for his life. The pointy-eared figure only stares, and as everyone expected, the war ends in the vampire's victory. He reaches out his hand, but in a flash, with one strike, the king's head falls to the ground. From now on, humans will live like cattle under vampire rule. Everyone nearby starts screaming in despair, but he simply gives the order to kill everyone there. All of it is to ensure the glory of the vampire era lasts forever. On the battlefield, absolutely everyone is dead. Two men walk up to a small group near the cliff's edge, asking if they are the last ones left. The one on the left mutters that everything ends too quickly when so few humans remain. The one on the right tells them not to fear death. Pain is only temporary. But a mother clutching her children in the back speaks up, saying the days of vampire oppression are numbered. In her dreams, God revealed that a human was being sent to save humanity. The men glance at each other, confused, wondering what this strange woman is talking about. One of them tells her not to worry, because she will not live to see tomorrow anyway. At that moment, she moves forward toward the first man, and the blonde one warns that they are coming. The knight faces the vampire head-on and lands a clean vertical slash straight through him. Yet the vampire disintegrates and reappears behind him. When the knight turns around, the vampire already has a crimson slash across him. The blonde rushes in to help, but he is torn in half as well. The last survivor there is, trembling and crying, tries to strike, but his sword is driven straight into his chest. The vampire steps in from behind, effortlessly catches the blade, with one hand, snaps it, and tears him apart too. Another body drops to the ground. The vampire advances toward the mother and her children, saying, "Death will be swift." He raises his arm, ready to strike, but just as he is about to deliver the blow, someone calls out his name. Yukul, it is a friend, urging him to look to the side. Out of the smoke, a strange knight steps forward. The men ask who he is and whether he belongs to that army. But Yukul says he does not carry the scent of a living human. He smells like a corpse. The stranger shifts 1 foot forward and leaps straight at him. The vampires laugh at his audacity for attacking, but in the very next second, his hand is already right in front of the first vampire's face. He grabs hold, slams him down, and smashes him against the ground. The vampire disintegrates almost completely, stunned and confused about what this tea really is. The man just crossed nearly 300 meters in a single leap, and now his friend is crumbling into dust on the ground. Yukul braces himself, lunges forward, aiming a slash at his opponent's leg. Seeing the perfect opening, he drives his sword straight into the center of the knight's chest. The blade stays lodged there, and Yukul demands to know why he did not dodge. He is sure the strike hit the heart, convinced the man should be dead any second now. But the knight simply extends his arm, grabs Yukul by the head, and lifts him up. Panicked, the vampire demands to know how he is still moving, with a sword stuck in his heart. Without answering, the knight drives his fist straight into the vampire's chest, disintegrating him on the spot in front of everyone. The blonde woman nearby, overcome with emotion, calls out to the hero, but he notices only the children have survived. He tells her to keep moving forward, because 3 miles away lies the sacred land where they will find protection. Still overwhelmed, the girl celebrates and declares he must be the hero sent by the gods. But the knight seems confused by this and begins removing his helmet. With nails in his chin and his entire head stitched together, he asks if she really thinks he looks anything like a hero. The children freeze in silence. Then, as his nose slips off, he bends down to pick it up, and the kids scream even louder, calling him a monster before, running away in terror. The so-called hero just laughs, saying that kind of reaction was to be expected. In this world, a rumor circulates. Is the rumor of a knight, half vampire and half human, who cannot die. The scene shifts to some time earlier. A group of people dressed in plague doctor robes find a man lying in the middle of an arena. One of them remarks how incredible it is that he died still standing in a fighting stance. Another asks if this is the one called Gunther, and the reply comes with certainty yes. 228 battles in the arena, 228 victories, and not a single defeat. They knew he was the greatest gladiator of that age, but even the strongest human could never defeat the vampires. The bulky plague doctor questions whether it is wise to entrust their future to to a stranger like him. The man known as Aryan replies that he will take the risk and believe in this fighter. He asks about the state of the corpse, and the answer is that decomposition has already begun, but it can still be used. And then, wait, what is this? The female plague doctor, fierce and sharp, steps forward. She approaches the body, saying the times demand a hero, and that is why he will become immortal. The scene shifts again to the boy standing atop a mountain of countless corpses. Someone praises his work, saying he has survived once again. Suddenly, he opens his eyes and sees all the plague doctors cheering in front of him, shouting that his eyes are open and asking if he can understand them. Confused, he demands to know what happened. He is certain he was dead. Aryan explains that he has been reborn to save humanity. Of course, he has no idea what they mean, and the bald doctor orders a mirror to be brought. As it is held up, Gunther looks and curses. What kind of nightmare is this? The boy has no arms, no legs, nothing. Horrified, he asks what kind of monster he has become, but Aryan calmly tells him he is not the monster. He is humanity's last hope. The bald man then explains that his brain now contains a life support device, something they only managed to create once. As long as that mechanism keeps working, he cannot die, even if his entire body is destroyed. Aryan tells him not to worry. The arms and legs are right there, made with special muscular engineering. The arms already resemble a bodybuilder's, and even then, the fibers produce dozens of times more strength than normal. As humanity's greatest gladiator, now equipped with those enhanced muscles, they believe he can fight a vampire head-on. Gunther, however, is no longer exactly shaken and asks if he was really brought back just to fight vampires. Aryan tells him to understand that he is the perfect candidate, and she knows he was killed by vampires too. So for humanity's sake, he should fight for everyone. Gunther replies that this whole saving humanity thing sounds nice and all, but no. Still, he has one condition, so he tells her to come closer and listen. The bald one steps in excitedly, saying that whatever Gunther asks for, they will consider it. But Gunther traps the man with his stumps against his thigh, demanding that they free him from this curse immediately. Aryan calls for Reiner, but Gunther warns them. He became the strongest gladiator because he learned to kill without hesitation. To him, both humans and vampires are selfish, small-minded people, and being resurrected just to fight again in this state only proves how foolish they are. The one thing he values above all else is not other people. It is his own life. That is why, if they do not want to see this man's head blown off right now, they had better give him arms and legs and release him. Aryan, a bit shocked, glances at the clock. Gunther asks what she is waiting for. Does she want the man's head to explode? She replies that he does not have much time left. Confused, Gunther presses her, and she explains that he has about 4 seconds. When he asks what she means, something flickers in his brain, and apparently he dies. The bald man is freed. Someone comments that, as expected, Gunther is out of control. Gunther opens his eyes again and finds himself face to face with the bald man once more, who asks why he did such a cruel thing, his jaw still aching. Gunther demands to know what happened, and the bald one explains that, like any animal or machine, he needs power to move. The power source for his body is human life essence. It seems to be coming from Reiner nearby. Oh no, maybe Reiner is a man. Hopefully not just a flat-chested woman. Gunther asks what they are talking about, and Reiner, whom I will keep calling a woman until proven otherwise, says it is exactly what he thinks. For him to stay alive, he must remain connected through that device and draw her life essence. Once the connection is cut, he can move for only about 2 hours at most. Gunther, desperate, demands to know what kind of nightmare this is, but the bald one calmly says his reaction is expected. He insists Gunther must believe, because everyone's lives, along with humanity's survival, depend on this research. We call people who receive these devices human batteries. Out of the hundreds who volunteered, only Aryan survived. It is extremely difficult to create, so Aryan may remain the only human battery forever. Gunther orders him to explain further, and he says it is exactly that. Gunther cannot fight only for his own life. He has to protect hers too. Otherwise, he will last only a couple of hours before ending up as nothing but a decoration on the wall. The other option, obviously, is for him to accept humanity's support and fight against the vampires. In the end, though, the choice is his. Gunther stands there, trying to process everything he just heard. when suddenly someone calls out for Reinhardt. Another plague doctor rushes in, saying they have an urgent problem. The bald man starts to reply that they are in the middle of something important when the newcomer blurts out about vampires, right before a sword pierces through his back. His body falls to the floor, and then a strange rat-like vampire steps in, saying Lord Benzel ordered him to bring all the humans and beautiful women. The other stranger on the right agrees, saying that is exactly it, while everyone else is stunned, wondering how the vampires even got into the base. One of the doctors asks Rainer what they are going to do. Meanwhile, Gunther is already shouting, telling them to attach his arms and legs if they care about their own lives. The bald one hesitates at the command, and everyone else is reluctant, saying they will die if they get too close to him. Gunther snaps back that if they do not, they will lose their general once he dies. The men argue that there are only 4 people. They do not need a general. At that, Arian steps up, saying she will buy them time and orders the rest of the organs to be connected. The bald man tries to stop her, telling her not to do it, and even Gunther yells at her to stay put. But she is already face to face with the vampires, who demand to know what kind of courage she thinks she has, facing them alone. She should know they are superior in every way, but before they can finish their arrogant speech, the first arrow flies straight at one's face, only to be caught in mid-air by the vampire. She sneers that they talk too much. He crushes the arrow in his hand and moves like a blur to the side. She fires another shot, nearly perfect, but he dodges again. She crouches and looses another, but he dodges once more, then closes the distance and drives a brutal kick straight into her stomach, slamming her into the wall and grabbing her by the throat. The creepy one stares at her and remarks on how beautiful her face is. I agree, he says Lord Benzel will like her very much. Other freak steps in, insisting he wants a share too, since the other one got the last 2. While they are bickering, someone mutters that they are just playing around. And bam, before the vampire can even turn, a devastating kick smashes his head against the wall. Now that I notice, he looks a bit like Cyborg from Teen Titans. Arian cheers, but she is instantly grabbed by the head, about to pop like a balloon. Gunther warns her to be careful. His life depends on her now. Broken and battered, she insists someone had to act. He stares at her for a moment, then says fine. But then the vampires rise again, their bodies piecing themselves back together. Gunther is stunned that the creature did not vanish even after its head was blown apart. Arian explains that to kill a vampire, you must destroy its heart. There is no other way. Another one charges straight at them. Gunther shouts for her to move aside as the vampire lunges, aiming a punch at his chest. Gunther just stands still, smirking, staring him down. The vampire does not understand, and his head explodes again. While that one falls, another rushes past, heading straight for Arian. But Gunther rockets forward like a torpedo and headbutts him, blasting him into the wall as well. Rainer can hardly believe it. This is the boy's first time using that body, yet he is moving so naturally. It not just look like he is fighting well, it looks like he was born with these modifications. And he already realizes that while his strength is insane, his speed is not abnormal. The only way to move fast is to use his leg muscles to launch himself and throw his body forward, since his limbs themselves do not move that quickly. Strangely enough, in just a second he has already adapted. Arian notices right away that he is actually enjoying the fight. Gunther seizes the vampire's head and says he has practiced enough with this body. The vampire, though, demands to know what he is. Did humans create some kind of monster? Gunther chuckles, saying those words are a little harsh. He was just born. He reaches out to finish him off, but the vampire begs him to wait, offering a peace treaty and claiming he has something valuable. Gunther tells him to speak, and the vampire reveals that Lord Benzel is nearby. They are his creations, and as soon as they die, Benzel will sense their disappearance and appear right there. Even he would struggle to fight that guy. Gunther asks why this so-called Benzel would bother avenging trash like him. The desperate vampire screams that it is because Benzel loves them, and he is the only one in the whole world who loves them all. Besides, if Gunther just hands over that girl, Benzel will let everyone else go free. Gunther glances over and says he can let him take the bald one, but the girl is off limits. The vampire refuses, insisting he cannot give up the bald man. Gunther replies that unfortunately, negotiations are over, and drives his hands straight through the vampire's chest. Offer rejected. The same happens to the other one, who vanishes while calling for Benzel. The protagonist wants to know who Benzel is and why everyone worships him so much. Arian explains that he is a high-ranked vampire. In the vampire world, they are ranked by the purity of their blood. High-ranked vampires are the pure ones, naturally. Low-ranked vampires are the offspring of variants and mixed bloodlines. Looking at the illustrations, Gunther points out that the black-haired vampires all seem to be low-ranked. She confirms it, saying the high-ranked ones have white hair and are weak to sunlight. The problem is that they can use their own blood to forge countless weapons in battle, making them extremely powerful. While the two are talking, Reinhardt steps in, asking if they did not hear what the vampire just said. Benzel will be there in an hour at most. Gunther asks if the bald man really believes that. He answers that it does not matter. They should at least be prepared. 1 hour is not enough time to get ready for a fight. Arian cuts in, saying that before anything else, they need a clear answer. Is he going to fight for humanity or not? Gunther pauses to think, then says that just like he mentioned earlier, the most important thing is his own life. And apparently, the only way he survives right now is by cooperating. Arian thanks him, calling it a noble decision, while he immediately demands to be connected before it is too late. She agrees, but says she has a little gift for him first. That is when he receives the armor. His head looks tiny compared to it, like a bodybuilder with an oversized frame. Strangely, the bald one says it looks wonderful and fantastic, asking what Gunther thinks. Every piece was chosen after countless tests to give him the perfect heroic, mighty appearance, like someone returned from the dead. Gunther, however, says the whole thing feels outdated, like something from the old days. Arian explains that the armor is refined with mithril. On top of that, each part was individually fitted to his body, so his limbs can be swapped easily, even while wearing it. This design was necessary because, against vampires who move at extreme speed, he will take many hits, and they need to minimize the damage he suffers. She points out the gauge on his wrist. That is literally his battery meter, like on a Samsung phone. It shows how long he can keep moving. Since he is already connected through his head, the timer is set to 2 hours. Just then, the ceiling starts rumbling violently. Everyone feels the impacts from above, one after another, and Gunther realizes something massive is approaching. He warns them, saying it is something gigantic. But the bald one argues that those vampires died barely 40 minutes ago. Gunther simply orders them to cut the connection and asks what the escape plan is. Arian explains that they are in the catacombs beneath his hometown, the place chosen specifically to create him, and that front door is the only entrance and the only exit. Gunther snaps that she should have mentioned that earlier. With no other option to deal with the crashing above, he puts on his helmet and warns her not to show herself, no matter what happens. Now hidden behind the helm, his expression hardens as he glares at the entrance. From the doorway, out of the darkness, 3 bald figures appear. Strange boys greeting them with a casual, "Hey." Everyone is confused seeing those 3 approach, but clearly this is far more terrifying than any normal person. Now that I notice, our protagonist really does have a bit of a Guts vibe this time. The strange vampires stand there smiling, saying he is the one who killed their family. Gunther wants to know if they mean those ugly, low-ranked vampires, if he was the one who killed them all, and if he really finished them that quickly. The one in the middle laughs, saying it is impressive for a human. Those others, however, were souls abandoned by their parents, which is why they had such hideous appearances. He thinks it is very sad that the boy felt no pity for the miserable way they died. Gunther, meanwhile, asks the bald man if this Benzel character is out of his mind. At that moment, the bald one asks if this is Benzel, the face collector. The peculiar little heads confirm it, and the bald man says they are even, since both sides have killed many comrades. So if he proposes a fair offer, each side should simply go its own way. The heads seem oddly calm, admitting it is not such a bad idea, especially with sunrise approaching. Too bad they have sworn loyalty to Lord Julius. It is a vow declaring that every human in this world must be killed. Sorry, bald one, negotiations are impossible. Gunther then asks what Benzel plans to do with that 3-headed body. On its own, it will not last long. The heads start laughing, mocking him and calling him funny, and more begin to sprout. Their words shift from mouth to mouth as they explain that low-ranked vampires exist to protect the high-ranked ones. If sunlight did not exist, they would truly be immortal. And their Benzel is right in the middle of all those heads, using them as protection against the sun. Gunther asks if that thing really is a vampire. Arian immediately realizes the obvious. All the heads are connected through blood, and now the name Face Collector makes perfect sense. Still, she is sure there must be some core managing all those connections. But before she can finish her thought, the heads lunge forward to bite. The impact hits like a magical strike, smoke rising. And of course, Gunther saves her. He cannot lose the only person keeping him alive. He orders her not to just stand there and to run to safety. She warns him to be careful. If he does not figure out where the core is, the fight will be meaningless. He simply tells her not to worry about him and to focus on staying alive herself. Benzel moves toward another fallen body, ready to bite down with his heads. But Gunther steps in, slamming him with a brutal punch that leaves him dazed. Before he can even process what happened, Gunther follows up with another blow, hurling him into the air. He warns that if the core cannot be found, he will just smash everything until it shows itself. Reinhardt is stunned that he is actually standing toe-to-toe with a high-ranked vampire. As the severed heads crumble, Benzel marvels at his strength, saying it is incredible. He has never heard of such a powerful hero among humans. They question whether he is really human at all. Gunther replies that it does not matter, and drives another punch straight into the mass of heads. But suddenly, one of the heads bites into his armor from within, declaring that, in the end, he has been caught. The bite force of those jaws matches his own fists, meaning once they bite down, there is no escape. Gunther tries to swing his other arm for another punch, but it too is bitten and held in place. In seconds, both his arms and legs are pinned down. Benzel sneers, saying he has a little gift for Gunther. He is about to experience the true hell that exists inside. The next chapter opens in an abandoned dump, where a child is crying. More than obviously, that child longs for their mother and is calling out for help. But days pass, and no one hears that desperate crying. Eventually, the child's cries come to an end. From that moment on, the child gives up on finding the warmth of family or anyone who might come to save them, and instead focuses only on finding a way to survive. The heads are biting into Gunther's arms and armor, and he admits the bite force is incredibly strong. He could handle 2 or 3 heads, but there are hundreds, all latched onto his body. With his limbs immobilized, he has no idea how to break free. He imagines there must be something deeper down, but he cannot even guess how many layers of heads are stacked below him. And if he fails, at the very least, he needs a backup plan. Then, from the depths, someone declares that these filthy vampires will not pass. A voice shouts that he will defeat them all. Gunther is confused, but the mass of heads, once human, cry out that they have not been defeated and will never give up. At that moment, a hand appears over him, and a strange, shadowy demon emerges, declaring that this man was once a great hero, Albert Loren, who saved hundreds of people. But now he too is part of the collection. Gunther points out that these heads are sitting on a pillar of hair, meaning it must be quite valuable. Benzel confirms it, saying these are the heads of heroes who sacrificed themselves trying to save others. He chose the most beautiful ones to display. Their noble spirit of sacrifice will continue to exist until the day humanity perishes. And he asks if Gunther does not find the hell he created wonderful. Gunther replies that it is an impressive place, but fitting Benzel's head in there will be a problem. Benzel reassures him not to worry, praising the strength and determination he has shown as greater than any hero he has ever seen. But Gunther cuts him off, saying he does not get it. He is just really ugly, and his head would look awful in that collection. Benzel, thrown off, asks if he is truly that ugly. Gunther tells him to take a look. When his helmet comes off, Benzel starts sweating, bewildered, unable to comprehend what he is seeing. He admits this is the ugliest human face he has ever laid eyes on, uglier even than the most grotesque vampires. Gunther looks downhearted, saying he never imagined he would live long enough to be called a monster by a monster. Well, now that Benzel has seen his face, maybe he can let him go. Still confused, Benzel asks if Gunther really thinks he will walk out alive. Gunther answers that he thought so, it should have been impossible, but now that he has seen a glimmer of hope, he has to fight. And with that, he sinks his teeth into the first head, ripping it off his arm. Benzel stares, then bursts into laughter, asking if Gunther really thinks he can chew his way out. He has to understand this is nowhere near enough. No one has ever escaped this place. But Gunther keeps biting, declaring that he is not just anyone. He is Gunther, and then slams another head with a brutal headbutt. No matter what happens here, he swears he will survive. He bites down on another, tearing it apart. The demon keeps watching as more and more heads close in. From the outside, it looks like a massive hornet's nest. The plague doctors assume he has already been killed or devoured, wondering what they should do next. The bald one insists he warned them. Choosing Gunther was a mistake. He tells Aryan this is the worst possible outcome, sending a corpse made into a place like this. They never should have placed humanity's hopes on such an idiot. But Aryan points, telling them to look, as multiple heads are falling. In the middle of it all, suddenly, Gunther bursts out with a devastating punch. Right then, the bald one shouts that he always trusted Gunther, the hero. The protagonist slams into the ground, instantly dodging to the side as yet another pillar of heads comes crashing down. But then the bald one asks where the boy's legs are. He just saw him moving only with his hands. Aryan steps in and says the plan has changed. There is no way they can win this fight in hand-to-hand combat. That is why they will handle it differently, with Aryan carried on his back. The plan is to run until sunrise, but just as a head lunges to bite, he leaps, or rather drags himself with his arms, trying to escape with her on his back. Aryan reveals that she actually brought extra parts of his body along. She had not mentioned it earlier because he never agreed to their proposal, but some of those parts have been modified to serve as weapons. Gunther, however, thinks there is not enough time to equip anything. Doing that might cost them everything. First, they need to create some distance. He propels himself forward again. Now, I am not sure if we should call it a jump, since he is using his hands. That is a paradox. Hold on, I will check with ChatGPT. And well, ChatGPT says if you push off with your hands, that is technically a lift using the upper body muscles, not a jump. A jump only happens when you use your legs. Unfortunately, during one of those lifts, Demon catches sight of Aryan's face and grins, saying she is far too beautiful. Immediately he starts running toward her in desperation, shouting that she must become part of the collection. Gunther, hiding nearby, mutters that it looks like she has gained herself a fan. He asks how long until sunrise. She replies that if it is the same as yesterday, maybe 5 minutes. The good news is that the exit is clearly in sight. They just have to wait for the chance and make a dash for it. But as they hide, the bald one and the other plague doctors are trapped behind iron bars, begging for help. Gunther says it is sad to see human lives about to end, but the truth is he is going to use them as sacrifices so he can escape. He tells Aryan this is the best choice for humanity's future, so she had better not do anything foolish. But she stares at him, and he notices she keeps staring, and he realizes she is about to do something reckless. Sure enough, she steps out from behind the pillar and calls out to Benzel, telling him she has been waiting for him. In an instant, the monster stops attacking the others and charges straight toward her. Gunther is forced to lunge with his arms, grabbing her and running, scolding her for doing something so stupid. Now that they are near the back of the chamber, there is no choice. They have to escape. He rushes toward the door, hurling himself forward, but snapping mouths rise up from below, nearly biting him. He slams into the staircase wall, then bolts upward as the swarm of heads chases them, shrieking that they are thrilled by his courage. They say he absolutely must join the collection. Gunther keeps climbing, and Aryan warns they are almost reaching the sunlight. But then the heads grab one of his arms again, telling him to become part of the collection once more. He snarls at them to let go, then smashes his own arm, using the recoil to fling himself upward. At last, he breaks free of the underground and faces the rising sun. But the moment he relaxes, Aryan calls out that she is being pulled back. One of the heads sneers that, in the end, he still managed to take one with them. And it seems that is true. Aryan is gone, while Gunther screams in despair. But one of the heads that touched the sunlight is reduced to ash. Nearby, vampires call out to Lord Benzel, asking if he is all right. He answers sadly that he failed to avenge his family because of that monstrous night. The deformed creatures reassure him, saying it is fine. The important thing is that he is alive. Their family's spirit will live on, and everyone will remain proud. Benzel warns them that this enemy is not someone they can handle. They cannot afford to lose more family members. He will have to deal with this problem himself. And with that, he says he needs a few more faces. At that moment, one of the vampires says it is all right, and announces that they brought 34 faces perfect for him. Another says he brought 7, and another adds that he brought 2. Benzel celebrates, praising them all, saying everyone is wonderful and that it was incredible work. Still, he admits this is the one he likes most. He tells Aryan to stay calm. Soon she will be inside him. Together, they will remain bound to each other until the very end of humanity. Meanwhile, Gunther is shouting, demanding that the bald one connect everything quickly. The bald man tells him to calm down. He never manages to do anything properly when rushed. Gunther snaps back, telling him to look at the gauge on his wrist. He is running out of time. Soon he will freeze up, and that will be the end of everything. So, he asks, cool. Then they just grab someone else, turn them into a human battery, and revive him again. The bald one asks if that means Gunther would not save her. Gunther chuckles, saying who knows, maybe he would not. The bald one explains that unfortunately, creating another human battery is impossible. The device inside him does not regenerate a corpse. All it does is supply power to a dead body, stabilizing it temporarily. That is why completely dead bodies cannot be brought back. And normally, full decomposition begins after 3 days. Gunther realizes that if he dies now, after 3 days, his body will be too decomposed to restore. By then, everything will already be over. The old man explains that they arrived late at the arena because they only received news of his death at the Colosseum after it was too late. The plan was to reach him before decomposition started, but unfortunately, that did not happen. On top of that, creating a new human capable of serving as a battery would take years. In other words, if he does not save Aryan, he is dead too. Still confused, Gunther demands an explanation of how this device works and where it came from. But the bald one says he cannot reveal that yet. As trust builds between them, he will learn little by little. The protagonist starts to stand, asking where his red arm is. The bald one answers that it is something special. Since close combat against Benzel is difficult, how about something for long range? Gunther grins, saying that sounds interesting. Place your bets, folks. Cannon, machine gun, grenade launcher, or something else. Make your mental bets, and let's see who wins. My guess is cannon. Back with Benzel. The vampire is in a frenzy, trembling and crying, spreading his arms wide and telling the victim not to fear. It will not hurt. Blood trickles from his hand, crawling over the person's face and consuming it completely. Benzel declares that his blood is both his instrument and his will. The body collapses, headless, and the face has been collected. Smiling through it, he says his blood is his will incarnate. The people in the back are frozen in terror, afraid they will be next. Benzel fixes his eyes on Aryan and tells her she is next. Finally, they have become one. She just stands there, looking back at him. He comments on her determination. Eyes filled with honor and fortitude show no fear, even in the face of death. He is eager to witness the moment those same eyes are consumed by fear and regret. But Aryan replies that the only truth that frightens her is that no one has ever managed to save his heart. Benzel twitches his fingers and admits she really is impressive. He is eager to see that same face repeat those words once he is inside her. He prepares his blood to advance on her when suddenly someone calls his name. Out of nowhere, another man attacks, saying he waited for Benzel to drop his guard for the perfect strike. He lunges in with a blade, but of course, he is instantly immobilized. And he cannot help but ask why on earth he called out first. He should have just gone for a clean strike. Benzel's followers apologize, saying they never imagined a knight would be among the faces. The captured man screams that even if he dies, someday a hero will succeed in ending Benzel's miserable existence. Benzel steps closer, saying he loves encountering a hero full of courage like this. It is truly a pleasure. When he sees that disgusting faith humans carry, believing someone will save or avenge them, he cannot help but laugh. He then holds out his deformed hand, telling the man to look closely. It became like this when he tried to save people from a fire. He remembers it vividly, staggering out of those suffocating flames, the agony of his flesh burning. And what did he gain in return? Praise for being a hero? Respect from others? He received that for a short while, but soon admiration turned to disdain, and he was treated like filth. The hero shouts for him to stop lying. That story cannot be true, but Benzel insists he can prove it easily. He wipes the blood from his face, revealing a melted, corrupted visage. The hero recoils in shock, and Benzel says that exact reaction is what everyone who once called him a hero eventually showed. In time, he was no longer welcome anywhere. Not because he had done wrong, but because in saving one person, he was left permanently disfigured. Everyone turned their backs on him. He hides his face again and declares that this sacrifice will be meaningless as well. In the end, people only end up hurt. The hero shouts that just because Benzel suffered in the past does not give him the right to massacre people now. Benzel coldly responds that this is not a massacre. One day, humanity will finally understand what they were trying to achieve. He slashes his hand, letting blood cover his face. And suddenly someone cuts him off, saying he talks too much. Benzel glances aside, and something slices through his deformed hand. Above, a grey pillar juts up like some kind of twisted tree. Turns out, nobody could have guessed. He actually has a weapon that launches giant iron stakes. If you predicted that, you are a legend. Gunther, of course, complains, asking which terrible designer created a weapon that is practically impossible to aim. At that moment, Arian calls to him. Gunther realizes she is alive and jokes that if she had died, he would have killed her himself. Benzel remarks that for Gunther to have walked all the way there alone, he must be eager to die. But Gunther just tells him to cut the small talk and come at him. He is running out of time. One of them is going to die within minutes. The weapon they gave him is called the Bone Launcher. The name was clearly thought up without much care. It is one of the modified weapons the Bald One designed, an arm adapted to create firing force through muscle energy. Specialized fibers pull back, then release violently, launching projectiles like bullets that can pierce. Through 4 or 5 walls, the drawbacks are obvious. First, the muscles have to contract fully to fire. Second, it only has 6 shots. Gunther mutters that the thing is almost useless, but at least now he has a way to fight at long range. Meanwhile, the Bald One is panicking, insisting they must kill Benzel at any cost. There is no way to save Arian without going through him. And even if they could rescue her and run, they would never escape the lower-ranked demons, who would eventually lead Benzel to them again. Considering Gunther's body urgently needs to recharge, this enemy has to die. Gunther steadies himself, tells them to relax, then hurls himself forward, promising that everyone else can die as long as he survives. Back in the catacombs, Benzel mutters that tracking him here was not difficult. The problem is that he has only 15 minutes, and in that time, he has to finish everything as fast as possible. He sneers that Gunther's weapon is disgusting. It does not matter how powerful the shot is. Benzel boasts that with countless layers of protection, nothing will ever pierce through. But the moment he says that, Gunther fires, blasting a crater straight into the mass of faces. He admits his aim is still bad, but soon enough he will get the hang of it and strike the heart. Strangely, Benzel tells his allies to protect the remaining faces. They protest, saying it makes no sense. They should attack the boy and restrict his movements instead. Benzel agrees, but tells them to be careful. Oddly enough, he really does seem to care about that, which is unsettling. The first 2 rush in, vowing to destroy that strange weapon. Gunther warns them to stay away. He is not looking to fight them. Still, he smashes one with a punch, breaking him apart on the ground. But because the heart is not destroyed, the vampire reforms behind him, grabs his neck, and snarls that a disgusting monster like him could never kill him. Gunther grips his head, taunts that he is not strong enough, then blows him apart, hurling his remains back into the sea of faces. He launches himself again, dodging an attack from Benzel while other vampires crawl up from below. He stops for a second, turns, smashes one in the face with his fist, and follows it with an elbow strike into another, demanding to know why they are not afraid of dying. The vampire dissolves, but instantly reforms from the ground again, grabbing his foot. He declares that they will always protect Benzel, because Benzel is the one who treated them with dignity. Their lives belong to him. Gunther, baffled by why they are acting like this, suddenly feels something. Benzel opens his jaws wide, clamping down on Gunther's head. The grotesque monster taunts that the boy seemed proud of his teeth, so this time he will start with what matters most. Gunther shuts his eyes and fires upward, blasting through a column of heads and carving a path. He darts aside as another attack strikes his back, grimly noting that he only has 3 shots left. The problem is figuring out where Benzel is in that endless swarm of faces. He needs a solution. Then Arian's voice rings out. She is calling for Benzel. Gunther is confused, not understanding what she is doing, while other vampires close in, ordering her to stay quiet. Gunther still does not understand. when suddenly a crimson slash flashes in front of him. It is not Benzel, it is another vampire. Gunther answers with a brutal punch to the head, finishing him off. He steps back as the massive heads press forward again. While Arian screams Benzel's name over and over, her voice desperate. Gunther does not understand at first until he notices one of the vampires behind her telling her to shut up. Arian screams again, calling Benzel a disgusting monster. Benzel, losing his composure, growls that no matter how much she stalls, it is pointless. But Arian shouts to Gunther to notice. Only certain faces react with expressions, and those same ones move before the others, likely the ones closest to him. Just as she says it, a vampire clamps his hand over her mouth, threatening to rip out her tongue. But before he can, another blast tears through the middle of the faces. Gunther realizes it clearly now, some of them really do react faster than the rest. Through the hole he opened, he sees Benzel. The vampires scream in panic that it does not matter if they know where he is, because he can just shield himself with more heads and vanish again. He tries to reconstruct himself, but part of the neural link connecting the heads has already been severed. He knows he needs to reconnect quickly, but Gunther tells him to hold still and fires. Again, tearing through part of his arm. The monster panics, realizing he needs to flee, but Gunther only answers with a cold grin. Here comes the heroic shot, but at the same time, the vampires come at him from both sides, everyone diving toward him. He is practically submerged in a pool of monsters, but he fires another shot. A direct hit, right in the head. The guy really does have the aim. His finger trembles just slightly after the blast. Arian warns that to kill a vampire, he has to strike the heart. Now he is out of shots, which means they have lost. Gunther, however, asks what nonsense she is talking about, losing, and keeps fighting, tearing through the vampires. He has only a flicker of energy left, and prepares for one last leap, saying it is time for the final attack. Arian pleads with him not to, but he declares he is going in with his body. He launches himself at Benzel, who is in the middle of regenerating. But as it happens, Benzel accelerates the regeneration of his eyes just to watch him come closer. The next chapter begins with a strange, big-headed figure asking his father if sacrificing himself for humans was worth it. They treated him like a monster. His appearance was changed. Maybe it was not such a good thing. At that moment, he did not know what to believe or what he should do. And now he realizes just how naive he was. Someone places a hand on his face. Apparently, it is Lord Julius, if I am not mistaken, who tells him he has been watching him for a long time. Julius says he intends to create a new world, but the process will be painful and difficult, and he needs help from people like him. Honestly, it looks like this is Benzel back when he was burned in the fire. He asks what kind of world Julius wants to create. Julius answers with something we do not hear, and the boy looks amazed, responding with something we also do not hear. Then Julius stretches out his hands, telling him to follow this path with him. The boy lowers his head and agrees. Back in the present, Gunther has driven his fist through Benzel's chest, smiling as he declares that this time he has won. Benzel's final question is how Gunther can still be a hero, even with that monstrous face. And with that, all the other vampires, desperate and panicked, begin to dissolve as Gunther loses consciousness. Sometime later, a carriage rolls through the forest. Gunther wakes up inside it. No arms, nothing left, only that device connected to his head. Arian tells him to move carefully. That thing is important and must not break. She also thanks him for his hard work. Thanks to him, countless lives were saved. Reiner praises him too. He never imagined the boy, reborn so recently, would already be capable of killing a high-ranked vampire. Gunther asks if the others died as well. Reiner confirms it. Yes, they were all linked by Benzel's blood. The protagonist immediately concludes that the easiest way to solve everything is to kill the pureblood vampires, since the rest will vanish. But Arian explains that unfortunately, the last pureblood vampire, Julius, disappeared after the Emperor's death. Gunther asks how strong this Julius is and what his powers are. She admits no one knows. No one has ever survived a fight against him, or perhaps he never even fought at all. There are no stories to tell. Gunther finds that strange. Do vampires not usually drink blood to survive? So why is he killing humans instead? Reiner agrees, but sadly, their only option is to defend themselves. He says they should head to headquarters. There, Gunther will better understand what is really going on. Gunther asks if any human cities are still standing. The bald one answers, The last surviving place is the holy city where all the survivors gather. It is a beautiful fortified place. It is also where they performed all their experiments and figured out how to create his body. It is humanity's last stronghold, standing for over 100 years without falling. And honestly, it feels just like those stories where everything starts so hopeful and then the titans show up and bring it crashing down. At that moment, the bald one steps out of the carriage and tells Gunther to take a good look at the city he will have to protect with his very life. The entire place is in flames. Gunther, stunned, asks if that is just part of the scenery. The next chapter opens with a pale-haired boy jolting, awake, startled by the news that Benzel is dead. He immediately jumps up, demanding to know who killed him and whether it was the enemy. Then he bursts into tears, panicking that the enemy is coming to kill him too. Desperate, he screams that he does not want to die, until a massive shadow grips him and reassures him there is no enemy. The voice laments Benzel's death, saying he was such an adorable little vampire. But what he cannot understand is whether a human could really have done it. It is hard to believe Benzel was killed by an ordinary being. Julius orders Ion to find the one responsible. A strange mouth flickers in the air and vanishes. Julius does not seem the least bit pleased by what has happened. We are then shown Bahal, the place known as the Holy Land. The biggest advantage for humanity settling there was its geography. It sat at the edge of a continent beyond a passage through countless mountains. The island itself provided enough land for farming. Around it, everything was cliffs and jagged rock, nearly impossible to climb. And the only way in or out was a 200-meter bridge. With so many natural advantages, a single garrison could normally hold back 10 armies. So the question is, what is going on? Gunther demands to know why it looks like everything is being destroyed. Reinhardt admits he has no idea. When they left, the place was perfectly fine. At that moment, the bald one calls out to someone named Leonard. Leonard, cheerful, says he is relieved the bald man is safe. He was worried he would be the first to die. He glances at Arian, telling her she does not need to worry either. She made it back safely too. And without hiding his feelings, he adds that she can call him Leonard anytime she wants. And he turns to Gunther, asking if he's really the one, clearly already aware of the experiment. When Leonard sees the device sticking out of Gunther's head, his expression darkens. He clicks his tongue, and Gunther immediately demands to know why this Kie is reacting like that. The bald one tells Gunther to relax and explains that Leonard is in charge of Bahal's defense force. Clearly, though, the job hasn't been going too well. Leonard tells everyone to follow an urgent fire has just been dealt with. Gunther demands an explanation for why the Holy Land is in such a state. Leonard explains that, unfortunately, the outer section of the bridge was abandoned. They couldn't defend it anymore. The bald one says it should have been easier now that Benzel is dead, but Leonard immediately doubts that, asking how it could be possible. Gunther answers flatly that, of course, it was him. Even then, Leonard doesn't look convinced. He clicks his tongue sharply again before explaining, the moment they left the city, they were attacked by a force unlike anything they'd ever seen, something far beyond any vampire they'd ever heard of. He promises to show them the bizarre state of the soldiers. Gunther scoffs, asking if this is supposed to be some kind of circus. Leonard Grimm says Gunther won't be joking once he sees it himself. The bald one asks if the city gates were really broken. Leonard nods. They were, and only by a miracle did the city avoid falling completely. That's why he wants Gunther to guard the bridge until everything is repaired. But the protagonist flatly refuses. He says he'd rather stay in the rear while the meat shields die up front. Leonard immediately calls him a shameless demanding to know if he has any idea why he's even standing there alive in front of them. 136 comrades volunteered to become Death Knights, and every one of them died. Researchers worked endlessly to create those organs, and it's because of their sacrifice and the defense of this city that Gunther is alive at all. But as a gladiator, he never truly understood what sacrifice meant. His whole life was about hurting others just to stay alive. The truth is, the one who should have died was him, not Gunther. The guy even admits he's jealous. Well, Kel, go ahead and sign yourself up. If you die, you die. Gunther stares him down and walks closer, then says, you're a real straight-laced guy, huh? Every time I meet someone like you, I feel like saying it straight to your face, go to hell. The man reaches for his sword, saying, hell, settle it right now. The guy is completely insane, right? Might as well just punch him and get it over with. I was joking, but the next chapter actually opens with him getting hurled out of the building and smashing into the ground. He really did take a punch. Aryan warns Gunther to be careful and not act so aggressively while he's still recharging. It takes forever to recharge. He's not even at full capacity yet. Gunther brushes it off, telling her to relax. It was just self-defense. The sun is setting now, and that idiot is all bandaged up because of our boy, who mutters that it should have ended with just one hit anyway. Aryan tells Gunther he has to restrain himself. There's no way he can win this war alone. And one thing the other guy wasn't lying about is how much it costs humanity to build each part of Gunther's body. Countless resources, countless sacrifices. On top of that, all the components are constantly decaying, which means they always need more people offering limbs and materials. She's doing her best to save as many lives as possible and protect the Holy Land, so the source of his power doesn't get cut off. Gunther listens to all this and simply asks if she's not just telling him to fight on the front lines. She answers that, of course she is, since that's the easiest way for them to win. He gives up arguing and says fine, but in that case, he wants a new weapon. The bald one tells him to come take a look at the modifications they have. Gunther sees something like an arm with a mouth on it and has no idea what the hell it is. The protagonist is unsettled, while Aryan asks if they really didn't produce anything else. Leonard, who's suddenly acting friendly, explains that they had to defend the city, so there wasn't time to make much more. Gunther, on the other hand, is furious, saying they should have made him a normal arm instead of this abomination of a mouth arm. The bald man insists it's perfect. Its bite force is immense. Plus, it comes with a flesh shield. That thing is insane. Aryan explains that with his own willpower, he can expand or shrink it at will. And obviously, it's tougher than any other part of his body, even resistant to fire. Gunther, though, says he'd rather have something like that bone launcher. Now that was badass, even if it only had 6 shots. But Aryan explains that it took 6 months to build that one. Every weapon requires an absurd amount of ingredients and human effort. And besides that, they still desperately need arms and legs. The rest of the materials are somewhat easier to get. Gunther asks if they really have nothing else. She replies that, unfortunately, it's wartime. At the door, Leonard says he has to return to protecting the city and wishes them both a good evening. After that beating, he really is acting polite now. Later that night, Gunther is holding a sword, muttering that he finally has something to get him ready for the fight. Ariane then explains that just like that man said, creating the Death Knight required over 100 people working together, plus support from the aristocrats and the royal family. Everyone agreed he was the perfect choice, so he doesn't need to care what anyone else says. She believes in him. Only he can save this world. Gunther, however, says he doesn't give a ta about that. She replies that having that kind of attitude shows he's lucky. But right then, the protagonist brings up the 136 people who died trying to become human batteries. She looks a little thoughtful. Gunther wants to know why. After seeing so many die trying to become human batteries, she still chose to take on that role. She answers simply that it was something that had to be done. He just stares at her and says he doesn't get it. Sometime later, he's at the window, watching closely to see if anything appears. Suddenly, Leonard bursts in, telling him to get ready, the vampires have returned. Gunther's been hooked up to that device all day, apparently to keep his battery fully charged. Now it makes sense. They disconnect him, and Aryan tells him he must come back alive. He's far too important. Gunther just puts on his helmet and says, survival is his specialty. Shall be activated. He now looks every bit like the Death Knight, warning that whatever comes out of the shadows, hell tear it apart. From the forest, a twisted creature emerges, wondering why today's audience is only one person. Gunther stares, curious why the thing's body is so contorted and why it moves so sluggishly. He immediately crouches, preparing to launch, and hurls himself forward faster than a vampire. He plans to end it in one strike. But the monster, still at a distance, greets him and declares that to please the audience, hell give his very best. He calls out to someone named Evelyn and says the first act of the performance is about to begin. The King of Pigs. And he's cut off mid-sentence by Gunther, who slashes forward, claiming victory. The problem? His blade didn't cut anything. The strike was perfect, so how the hell did this thing dodge? The creature starts crying, asking why Gunther is being so rude. He should have followed the proper performance. Then a boy, twisted on the ground, calls out that it's the show of the King of Pigs and the dwarf. It's time to begin. He slits his hand, blood rises, and out of nowhere, a circus tent materializes. Gunther realizes Leonard's words about this being like a circus were literal. Curtains spread open, and from within, an attack bursts forth. Gunther blocks, and a pig-faced man is hurled aside. But alongside him, more small ones come rushing in. The dwarf and his pigs, all charging at once. Explosions shaking the ground, Gunther tears through them with ease, carving them apart. He blocks another strike, slices down one more, cuts another charging from the side, and pins one to the ground, pressing down until the blade tears him apart. Furious, Gunther mutters that these weaklings are just wasting his time, and he needs to end things quickly. He shreds another and sprints straight toward the tent. His plan: take the leader's head. But from within, a warped mouth laughs, and suddenly flames erupt. Gunther raises his shield, blocking the inferno. Then out comes the same demon from earlier, riding atop a massive, hulking brute. Gunther instantly realizes this must be the so-called king. The demon riding on his back declares that the king destroys all enemies of the people. Another torrent of flames roars forth. Gunther blocks once more. The pig-masked monster bellows that the king's fire burns everything, and that Gunther won't be able to take another step. But Gunther calmly holds his ground behind the shield, leaving the beast baffled. Demon orders the king to increase the flames even more. The fire intensifies, but Gunther only asks if they seriously think that's enough. He hurls his sword, spinning like a boomerang into the king's face. In the very same instant, the beast flinches. Gunther rushes through, smashing them both apart with a devastating punch. He catches his sword on the other side and says he expected this fight to be tougher. Yeah, he absolutely demolished them. But it's true, when the creature first appeared, he called this the first act. Gunther smirks and says to bring on the second performance already. He keeps walking through the tent until, at the far end, he finds what looks like a sword with something attached to the tip. Around him are all kinds of equipment that look like torture devices, and he remarks that the decorations here are quite charming. The demon, crying, thanks him, stammering that he's not used to anyone ever reaching this second performance. That's why he prepared it so carefully. Gunther slashes again, but once more, his blade doesn't touch anything. He curses, wondering what kind of body this monster has that he can't land a hit. Vampire slits his hand, saying it's time for the second performance. Blood merges with his body as he announces the clown's confession of suffering, Evelyn. Fully transformed, he tells Gunther to enjoy the show as the whole place begins collapsing around them. Gunther charges in to strike, but the monster leaps away. The protagonist mutters that the kick is way too fast, but he wants to see how long it lasts. Gunther kicks, sending rocks flying. The creature blurs into a thin line, dodging everything. Gunther glares as the creature pulls two swords from its mouth and charges. He blocks with his shield. Another flurry of slashes, blades clashing violently. Gunther parries, counters with a leap and a slash. But again, the monster twists into a line and slips away. He has no idea how to land a hit on something like this. Then the creature aims straight for his helmet, smashing him backward. In the very next second, it bursts out of the tent in a spinning strike. Explosions rock the area. From afar, Leonard observes that Gunther seems to be under heavy pressure. It's hard to see, but clear enough the knight's attacks aren't working at all. Worse, he's already been forced back to the start of the bridge. The bald one urges them to bring out whatever they have. He wants to see it, while Aryan looks visibly worried. Sure enough, Gunther is now on the bridge, clashing with the monster's flurries. He ducks under one strike and counters, but again the creature dissolves into a line. He growls that the cha moves like a worm. The monster retaliates with another strike, detonations rattling the bridge. Aryan observes that this creature seems able to detect any attack within a certain range of awareness. The bald one asks if there's anything they can do to help. Leonard explains that unfortunately, all siege weapons were destroyed in the last battle. Aryan adds that fighting on the bridge must be avoided. They have to remember that Gunther's body is pure muscle, with almost no fat. If he falls into the water, he'll inevitably drown. Then comes another strike. Gunther is thrown off the bridge. At that exact moment, Aryan shouts that if he falls, it's over. But instead of plunging into the river, only rocks splash down. Gunther manages to jam his sword into the bridge's edge, stopping his fall. Still, he knows that if he falls into the river, the raging current will make escape nearly impossible. As he climbs back up, he glances at the gauge on his arm. Time is running out fast. This fight will be brutal. From above, the monster smirks eerily and descends toward him. Somehow, Gunther manages to vault back onto the bridge, but his arm is gone. When did that happen? Maybe during the king's fire earlier, when he charged through. It must have been destroyed, which explains why he hasn't used his shield in a while. The twisted creature grins, saying Gunther is strong, far stronger than the last ones. But now it's time for Aryan and the Bald One to act. Both call out to Gunther, issuing a direct order retreat. If there's one thing Gunther knows how to do, it's survive. In an instant, he's already sprinted back through the gates and into the castle. The doors slam shut behind him. He immediately asks if they came up with any ideas during the fight. The Bald One admits they're still trying to devise a plan. Aryan says the perfect plan is to hold that monster on the bridge until sunrise. They have no siege weapons, no proper arms for him, and Gunther still can't take on a vampire like that alone. The sun will rise in 5 hours, but the problem is that his limit is only 2, which means Hell have to go out, fight, come back to recharge, and then return to battle again. The Bald One tells him to wait a moment. Hell replace his arm. Gunther asks if that's really the best solution. Aryan answers that the one fatal flaw in this strategy is that it takes longer than he thinks for him to recover. Gunther asks how long, and she says that for him to fight for 2 hours, they need 20 minutes of recharge. Oh, but that's not so bad, he thinks. Of course, there's a demonic monster outside, which makes it risky, but still, it could have been worse. But the Bald One adds that he has to be in a stable condition for the recharge to work. He can't just abandon the vampire, and on top of that, he has to protect both himself and Aryan. Gunther thinks it would be nearly impossible to do all that at once. At that moment, Leonard throws the door open, gives Gunther a hard stare, and shuts it again. Turning to the soldiers, he orders them to hold for at least 20 minutes, no matter what. Gunther mutters that this guy has lost his mind. He must have seen him fight that vampire, so he should know there's no chance at all. In 20 minutes, everyone will be dead. Reiner responds that they already know that. Even so, they've chosen to fight and protect the city. The soldiers stand there, trembling, but with shields and spears raised at the ready. And Leonhard delivers the epic line, "If we don't burn here and now, then who else will drive back the darkness?" The door bursts apart and chaos erupts. Outside, soldiers scream desperately, shouting to hold fire, shouting to attack, while blood seeps in under the door. At first, it looks like Gunther is laughing, but no. He's just standing there with his eyes shut, trying to hold himself together. Outside, the soldiers are being torn apart. Leonard falls to the ground, and a monster looms over him, about to strike. He raises his shield, his head nearly being crushed, but still blocks the first hit. The monster goes in for a second strike, and then Gunther tears through the wall, firing his bone launcher, arm and clamping down with that monstrous bite. "You let yourself get distracted," he growls. "Didn't think an attack could come from the wall, huh?" Leonard, shocked, demands to know what Gunther is doing there. He had only just started his recharge. Even the Bald One is impressed that the single-arm strike worked. Gunther thinks to himself that everyone knows he can't hold this fight here for long, with all these people around. It only took him 5 minutes to recover. He can keep this battle going until morning. That's because he's going to drag this monster somewhere else. With that, he hurls himself off the bridge with the creature, crushing into the sea below and declaring that now neither of them will escape. Underwater, he grips the monster with one arm, hammering punches into its stomach. He laughs, asking what the heck thinks of fighting in a place like this. He swears Hell crush its heart with his bare hand. The monster thrashes, coiling around him like a snake, stabbing its sword into his arm. Because of the human battery connection, his first limb is easily torn off. The mouth arm snaps off a chunk of flesh before he takes another stab, this one straight through his gut. Both of them scream, thrashing in the black water. The monster tries to swim upward, but Gunther surges from below and bites into its stomach. He snarls that this alone won't be enough to kill it. With that bite, the creature's heart is exposed. It swings again for another strike, just as Gunther goes in for another bite. And then a woman's voice, reminds him. Back in that wasteland where no one survived and not a single living thing existed, You called out to me. She once heard the faint cry of someone dying, screaming with every bit of strength they had left. As she drew closer, she felt relief. Then curiosity struck. This was a world no one would ever choose to be born into. And yet, even someone born in a wasteland and left to rot still desperately wanted to survive. For a time, she wondered if his cries were truly for salvation. And now, standing before him with bodies scattered everywhere, she says she has her answer. The boy, beaten and broken, asks what she means by that. Suddenly, the strange woman grabs his face and tells him he always wanted revenge. No one wants to be born into this world. No one wants to keep living here. Even so, he screamed to be saved with everything he had. He was born with that will to survive, like a starving dog. And that drive, that will, comes from his desire to take revenge on those who put him in this world and those who abandoned him. Gunther closes his eyes and says yes. She tells him to get ready for the next fight. Hell have to prove his will. Suddenly, someone calls his name, and all that's left is his head, grinning with that crazy smile. It looks like he really did die by drowning. But luckily, because his head was severed and his brain remained intact, he's still alive. His body was too heavy, packed with muscle to be recovered, but his head floated. Arian picks him up, thanking him for still being alive, while Lena tells him to hurry, because the fight isn't over yet. Only the head survived. This guy's broken already. Reiner is shocked, seeing only his head revived, reacting strangely, trying to make sense of what Gunther is saying. Arian calms him, explaining that he can't speak properly without a torso. The new body is almost finished, he just has to wait a little. Still, his head twitches unnervingly. Sometime later, he's restored and mutters that the last fight was boring as hell. He asks if more vampires showed up. Leonard says no, but that thing is probably still alive. Gunther insists that's impossible. He bit through the creature's heart. Leonard replies that he wants to believe that too. But where they found Gunther's head, they also saw footprints leading out of the water. He followed the tracks and found a strange carriage, likely belonging to vampires. Since they had no chance of winning outright, the priority was recovering Gunther's body. Gunther refuses to believe it, telling them to just look at his teeth. He shredded the monster's heart. Leonard concedes but insists they need to check anyway, just to be sure. The group creeps through the bushes, and sure enough, they spot a suspicious carriage. Leonard tells Gunther to check it out, but to be extremely careful. As Gunther approaches, he sees that the footprints are indeed fresh. The windows are covered, clearly hiding a vampire from the sun. And if a high-ranking vampire is inside, this could be his best chance to gain an advantage. He slowly reaches the door, opens it, and finds the carriage empty. He steps inside, and hears an eerie laugh echoing. The door slams shut. In the same instant, something lunges at his head from the side, but he blocks it. A brawl erupts in the dark. He can't see a thing. One of those small knife-wielding dwarves knocks him outside, and Gunther orders the others not to interfere. Another strange one appears, carrying a little shack on his head, announcing that the slayer of the Pig King has arrived. Gunther demands to know why they're so weak if they're vampires. The creature explains that they struggle to walk and fight because they are all failed births. Worse still, some are failures born from other failures, twisted upon twisted. Gunther sneers that he doesn't care. He throws one aside and declares it's time to wipe them all out, because they kill humans without hesitation. The one with the little house on his back trembles and says it's fine. Just follow him, and hell lead the way to the final performance. Gunther follows, surrounded by countless others watching. He mutters that the squealing pig noises they make are ridiculous, especially since they're not even pigs. The creature explains that it's because they weren't created as humans, but rather as plump pigs, which is why they sound like that. He pulls back a curtain and announces that it's time to see the most beautiful creation of them all. There she is, the strange one, Evelyn. Gunther steps in, glaring, and she greets him by saying the audience has arrived. He demands to know how she's still alive when he already ate her heart. She explains that a vampire doesn't die unless the entire heart is destroyed. He only took a bite out of part of it. The only problem now is that because her heart is no longer whole, she can't use the power of blood anymore. Gunther thanks her, saying it's very kind of her to explain everything so clearly. But now she's nothing more than a shadow waiting for the sun. With that, he charges in, declaring that this time she won't survive. Meanwhile, outside, Leonard asks how much time the guy still has. They say 50, and the plan is that if another 10 go by without any news, they'll try to go and get help. At that point, one of the knights asks if those vampires were ever human. Leonard, confused, doesn't really get it. Then the guy tells him about a story he once heard, about the children in a city called Trumps, where orphans kept disappearing. While they were searching for them, they found a strange place, a basement with no sunlight at all, filled with tools meant for breaking human bones, all sorts of metals and strange objects. And there, at the back of the room, were piles of broken skeletons stacked up, all clearly looking like they belonged to young humans. The guy next to him wants to know what was going on in that place. The man just explains that he heard products were being manufactured there. Apparently, they were making and selling bizarre humans, and the smaller and more deformed they were, the more expensive they sold for. The guy says that's ridiculous. Who would buy something like that? The chemist answers that it was just gossip, so he has no idea. But rumors said it was probably wealthy merchants and nobles. That's because having an extremely small servant was like a symbol of power, as if it were a jewel, some kind of rare material. The man says he gets it. But why would anyone do something like that to a person? The other explains that maybe it was because they already had everything in this world, and unless something was unusual and rare, they didn't want it. The end of the story says some of the survivors from that place were sold to a circus. He thought it was an exaggerated, nonsensical story, really, but maybe those there had been the victims. Then he drops the heavy question and asks the captain if the barrel they're protecting, the people behind that bridge, are really worth it. Man, while they're lost in all this philosophy, the protagonist smashes the door down with his sword. Vampire jumps and says they suffocated him, scraped him, and broke his bones. The horrendous pain never ended. Even when he cried and begged to be killed, they ignored him. Until one day, suddenly, they let him go and told him he was free. He asked why all that torment, all that pain, all that time, and why, out of nowhere, was he given that so-called freedom? That's when the man with the feather in his hat said, "Evelyn, the trend has passed." Evelyn laughs. Then her face hardens and she stares at him again. She says she wants to ask one last thing. What's the trend now? Stories with systems and stories with a protagonist who blows money on women. That's what's popular. Anything else, she can be informed. Gunther says that for him, the trend is that no matter what happens, he survives in the end. It's the story of a man. The whole scene with Evelyn first shows her face silent, then her reaction, saying it's something difficult. Yes, definitely a lonely performance. And man, the carriage is shattered. Sunlight hits, and she's completely turned to ash. It ended a bit anticlimactically, but I think that was intentional, just to leave us heavy with that psychological weight. Meanwhile, back in Bahal, they're talking about how it looks like he already killed 2 high-ranking vampires. And according to what people say, there are about 6 more around Bahal. Knowing this, the guy says he's really going to have a lot to face. A scared one comments that they'll have to help him because, yeah, he won't be able to handle it alone. But the stubborn one tells him to stop being crazy. Why should he care about those worthless people? Besides, they had a natural fortress connected to the continent. Their side, past the sea, had a much better chance of surviving. Not to mention, vampires hate water. Has he ever heard of a vampire swimmer? And right at that moment, they hear a thud. Then another thud, and the guy asks what that is. We're not going to find out right now, because we're seeing Gunther in a suit, asking if they're really going to a festival when everything is ruined. She says yes, it's time to celebrate the deaths of 2 high-ranking vampires, and it looks like she's visiting the outer region. Gunther says she seems to be an impressive person, doing something like this when lives and time are on the line. The bald one replies that the person coming is the current leader of Bahal. Still, it would be best for Gunther not to say anything weird to her, because that would become a massive headache. He doesn't quite get it. But then a carriage approaches, and someone announces that Her Grace is arriving. The only heir of pure lineage, Her Majesty Queen Olivia Hound. Everyone welcomes her and bows, while Gunther just stares at the troublemaker. Yeah, she looks like a sly one. You can tell in a second. Oh, what an artist, she's got talent. But she's also a spoiled brat, complaining that the place is dirty and smells strange. The man nearby apologizes while Gunther mutters that it's insane for her to say something like that in the middle of a battlefield. Obviously, it stinks. At once, the bald one starts trembling, While the protagonist couldn't care less, she, however, walks right up and says he must be the so-called corpse knight. She gets close, looks him over, and says he's pretty ugly, probably because his body was modified. Still, she heard he already took down 2 high-ranking vampires, and she personally came to praise him for everything he's done. One of the men beside her claps, saying he's an example, fighting that hard for the people and for the queen's heart. She thanks them for the compliments, but says it's better to go inside and get away from this filth. Inside one of the houses, cobwebs everywhere. She still complains that the place is dirty. "Oh, Queenie, I honestly can't wait for you to get knocked around, then saved by our corpse knight, only for him to be such a chad that he smacks you right on the head." The brown-haired man says everyone will be punished harshly for the mess, but she answers that it's fine, it's wartime, and shall be generous and understanding just this once. At that moment, she calls for Gunther and asks what reward he wants. Arian answers instead, saying what they really need are more men and materials for support. She reminds everyone that countless nobles and royals had doubted the corpse knight, but now that the plan worked, and this is a way to bring an end to the war, they need more help to sustain everything. That's why she asks for total support now, so they can take major steps toward peace. The queen, though, glances at her and asks if she's an Aryan. Even if she acknowledges the girl's merits, how can she provide all that support with her limited resources? She, Olivia Hound, as the last true descendant of the royal family, always needs to invest in countless future possibilities to keep her chances alive. So now, the support Aryan gets is the best she's going to get. That's a fact that won't change. Gunther immediately blurts out, "What the hell is she even saying?" The bald one explains that she thought this plan would fail, so they invested in many other weapons. Gunther then raises his voice, and she hears it, so she can even admit that her plan and her decisions were wrong. Aryan, a bit downcast, says that at the very least, she should give official recognition to those who sacrificed themselves as part of the plan. The brown-haired man calls her rude, but the queen answers again, saying she always wanted the research and had demanded that the project be carried out in secret. She always found it disgusting, this business of bringing back a dead person to be used as a knight. After all, something like that would only stain the honor and reputation of the royal family. That's why nothing can be made official. Otherwise, the knight's existence would become public, and that would be bad for everyone. She then declares that the reward will be the title of count, along with fertile territory down in the southern region. The odd fellow beside her pipes up again, praising the queen as incredible and flawless in her judgment. A man, then she stretches out her little hand and says to come closer and kiss it if they accept the reward. Gunther glares and mutters, he cannot stand this nonsense. In a situation where no one knows if they'll die today or tomorrow, she's there rambling about honor and pride. Looks like they brought in some crazy woman claiming to be the queen. Humanity is doomed. The guys in the back are all apologizing to Her Majesty while telling Gunther to shut up. And now the queen herself starts to lose it and orders the protagonist to shut his mouth. Oh no, now I'm rooting for her to get beaten to death by a vampire while Gunther just stands there laughing in her face. Then 2 men burst through the door and Leonard warns that danger is coming. A massive creature was heading straight for Bahal. Outside, while watching, the bald one tells Gunther not to lose his mind, but Gunther replies that everyone's going to die anyway, including himself. So he's not about to respect that weird woman. Aryan doesn't even care, she just wants to know if his true Toronto was destroyed in a single night. The blonde guy answers yes, that thing showed up in an instant and wiped everything out on the spot. Just a few punches and nothing was left. Gunther says it doesn't make sense. Talking about strong punches like that, they're supposed to be talking about a vampire. But that's when the bald man starts trembling, asking what the hell that thing was looming on the horizon. Dear God, it really was a Titan. Attack on Titan, here we go. Our boy is about to turn into Eren Yeager. Maybe every short guy's dream can come true, connecting those 50-meter legs. Of course, with each step, everything was being destroyed. And the protagonist asks if the meaning of the word vampire hasn't gotten a little twisted. How could that thing be a vampire? Aryan explains that a vampire is just someone who uses the power of blood, and as far as she knows, high-ranking ones with enough strength and willpower can do whatever they want, shaping and changing whatever they want with their blood. That vampire was probably the one known as the Iron Titan Miranda. Look at him even kicking down the capital's walls. Obviously, I caught the reference. And of course, no bullet, no weapon, nothing worked against skin that looked as hard as steel. She had already heard the rumors, but seeing him face to face like this was terrifying. Gunther comments that for someone nobody had ever actually seen, he seems pretty famous. She says yes, that's exactly why countless studies have been done trying to find his weakness. He tells her to spill it, and she says it's simple. None, he doesn't have a weakness. They're already rushing to the carriages, and she explains that unfortunately, that's all the information they have. Nobody has ever managed to cut his skin, so no one knows what's inside. Both of them, however, reach the same conclusion. If that thing enters Bahal, the whole city falls. Arian says that's why they always try to track the monster. Gunther wants to know where it's headed. The bald one answers that obviously they have no idea. Apparently, Miranda always moves spontaneously. But Arian insists that, just like any other, he must burn in the sun. Gunther finds that suspicious. Something that size would need a peculiar place to hide. But she shakes her head. She says that when the sun rises, he transforms into another form that's not a titan. And it's at that moment, right after the transformation, that he has to be killed. That's the only thing she believes could work. Gunther realizes it's basically a deadly game of hide-and-seek. The bald one says that looking at the map today and the speed he's moving, he still won't reach Bahal, so they have a few days to prepare. At this pace, Hell probably hide out in some ruined village with lots of buildings. And if they can find him there, odds are high that tomorrow Hell enter Bahal. Meaning, the winner of this fight will be decided in that village. They arrive, already spotting the gigantic footprints. At least that makes him easy to track. As soon as Gunther gets there, he wants the perfect answer. Somebody point me to where the freak is. But Leonard replies that first they'll have to check the 120 houses in that place, starting from the south. He asked the Queen for troops, but unfortunately there weren't that many available. The man in front replies that the Queen ordered most of them to stay at the base and reinforce the defenses. Gunther laughs, saying it's clear her pride matters more than any human life. But with no time to waste, Leonard just orders everyone to start searching. They have to split into groups, enter each house, and check as much as possible. So here we are, with them going in, pulling everything apart, investigating drawers, boxes, even breaking down doors. Gunther steps inside and asks himself, where the hell is that Iron Titan? The Jetkse was a huge, muscle-bound giant, so he figured it had to be a big human too. That's why he focused on open spaces instead of tight ones. He walks up to a door, punches it, and says this looks perfect. A soldier reports that nothing has been found yet. The sun is still up, and the bald one thinks something's off, with only a few houses left. Arian replies that he could be hiding in a way that's hard to imagine. Gunther stomps the ground, frustrated, saying he's already destroyed more than 10 houses and hasn't found anything, not even a rat, let alone a vampire. Suddenly, footsteps echo along the hallway. He pauses, confused, steps outside, and runs after them. As he rounds the corner, there's something covered in what looks like a black cloth. He squints, asking himself what that strange mouth is supposed to be. The scene shifts to Lord Julius, and that mouth is whispering in his ear. Now he knows the immortal knight is there, and the shadow confirms it. The man is sure it's another one of Bahal's creations. The big-mouthed one wants to know what this Bahal is that all the humans keep talking about. All he knows is that it's the only city left intact. Julius then explains that Bahal is actually where it all began. That's why he's been dragging things out, because it also needs to end there, and the time has come. A sharp-toothed one says that if that's the order, hell tell Miranda. Julius says fine, but he also wants the immortal knight brought to him. The sun keeps sinking, and just then, one of the houses explodes. The bald one is already calling out for Gunther. When he gets inside, he asks if it's a vampire, but instead, a boy steps out with a bear on his shoulder. He asks if this could be the creature, but they all say it's impossible. The sun will set in an hour, and now they're screwed, because if it's not here, it has already moved on. Leonard orders them to resume the search while Gunther complains that it's impossible to find something when they don't even know what they're looking for. Arian just says it's the only option. They don't have many people here, and there's no other way to handle it. Then Leonard suggests they burn all the houses down. If anything is hiding inside, human or not, it'll show itself. Arian thinks it's too risky, with forests all around. The whole island could go up in flames. Gunther tells him to give it up, that they should look for another solution. But the bald one refuses, saying they can't back out because if they do, the next battlefield will be Bahal. He reminds Gunther that he was created for the plan to protect that city. Giving up was never an option. It was time for everyone to search again. He takes off running, and Gunther is left confused until Leonard explains that Reiner's family is in Bahal. He has a daughter he cares for deeply. Gunther smirks and says the bald guy finally managed to do something worthwhile with his life, while Leonard shouts for everyone to keep searching and not give up. Time passes, and Reiner realizes there's nothing here. The sun is just about to set when he hears a sound behind him. He turns around inside a box. Something is shaking. Suddenly, the entire house is blown apart, and something starts rising. Hess thrown back by the impact while Gunther mutters that he knew something like this was bound to happen. Now everyone is screwed. Arian asks what happened, and the bald one explains that he found it. In that situation, at that moment, he should have killed it. The protagonist wants to know what he means by not killing it when he had the chance. Then he explains that, inside the box, what he found was a child. Gunther is shocked, but right in front of them, the Titan rises. As soon as the beast takes form, it winds up a punch and hurls it straight at the trio. Next chapter. The soldiers are trying to flee, but the monster stomps down on them, and from a distance he can already see the city. Gunther shows up carrying a pillar, spins it 3 times, and throws it, but it smacks the Titan's arm like nothing but a toothpick. He leaps up and throws a punch too, and nothing happens. Just like they warned, that skin can't be pierced. He keeps punching, slashing left and right, but nothing works, until even his arm breaks apart. Then the monster shifts, raising his hand to smack him down, but he dodges. He keeps climbing up its arm, thinking that no matter how strong something is, everything has a weakness. Another strike comes. The beast claps his palms together. He slips out again and keeps climbing. Still, in the middle of this chase, he suddenly loses his grip, and the Titan manages to catch him by the foot. Looking straight into its eye, Gunther wonders if this is the spot that might be exposed. But then, the monster flicks him, and Kid is completely disintegrated. At the same time, the Queen sees the Titan approaching. It is effortlessly crossing the ocean. The Queen declares that there's no such thing as an immortal vampire. She hasn't met any high-ranking ones, but she's seen plenty of low-ranked vampires killed by normal people. That's why she says they don't need that filthy knight. Oh, Queen, do us a favor and die in as much pain as possible. Then Simp number 1 shows up, saying all the adjustments are complete, and they're ready for launch. They have built a massive wall of spear parts. But really, if one spear doesn't pierce, throwing 50,000 of them won't change anything. 50,000 spears still won't go in. The man insists they have 100 gigantic arrows with the tension force of 100 horses. The monster's skiing in will be pierced easily and its heart ripped out. They'll win without leaving a trace of it. Queen laughs, stating that the moment it falls, everyone will recognize her as the true emperor, the one who rules humanity. She orders everyone to witness the power of the royal family. Raising her hands, glaring ahead, she commands the shot to be fired. Meanwhile, the others gather around what's left of Gunther, and the bald man says he can't believe it. Is this what remains of humanity's hope? He tells himself he should have been more resolute. If he hadn't hesitated for even a single second, none of this would have happened. Hez right. He has a daughter in the city, and he hesitated to kill that pale kid in the box. Arian looks sadly at Gunther when suddenly something drops beside them. It's a piece of his head with a little hand, trying to say he's still alive. That's when they realize he had been up in the tree this whole time. Arian thanks him right there, saying she's glad he survived, while he, poor guy, can even speak. Soon they're in the carriage, with Gunther asking for new parts. He can't open his mouth properly, but Reiner keeps watching and manages to translate something. Since he can open his mouth, attack the eyes. Arian says she understands, but even if they destroy the eye, the heart will still be intact. Then he whispers something else to Reiner, who translates it. He's basically going to enter the body through the eye and run straight to the heart. Arian pauses to think, and admits that if they can enter through the eye like that, they might actually have a chance. The problem is figuring out how to reach the head in the first. place. Just then, they hear the volley. An endless sequence of arrows fired at the Titan, slamming straight into its chest. Everyone knew this was the weapon the Queen had prepared, and it did look pretty strong. Guess what? When the smoke clears, the Titan is standing there intact, not a single one pierced through. One of the men states the obvious from the wall. The Titan didn't fall, and it's still closing in. Another rushes over and asks the Queen what they should do, but she demands to know the next plan. The man hesitates to explain, while she bites down in rage, and with that, the Titan reaches the sea. Meanwhile, the bald one is still blaming himself, saying he should have been more decisive. Suddenly, someone shouts for their father, then runs up to hug him. She's carrying a four-armed Gunther on her back, saying she's glad he's safe. No wonder he's the great general. Reiner calls out to Audrey, demanding why she hasn't evacuated yet. He told her that once it got close, she was supposed to retreat, but she shows that she brought along a piece of the corpse knight's body. And on top of that, her hair was already falling out from stressing about her father. Turns out she's huge and muscular. That's why she says the bald man should worry about himself instead of her. He realizes she's right, while the protagonist is in Arian's arms, struggling to mumble something. The odd girl steps up, reaching her hand out, saying she wants to greet him. She's excited to finally meet him, but he just stares at her hand, glaring with even more anger, unsure if she's mocking him. The girl apologizes, and Arian says they don't have time. They need to connect body parts 253 and 350. They were going to climb the Titan's body. Audrey then says if it's piece 350, she's already done something similar. She'll connect that piece and bring back a crucial part. The bald one starts to say it seems like the footsteps have stopped when, suddenly, right in front of him, the Titan's kick lands square on the girl. Man, that hurt to watch. I thought she was going to be that cool, tough character, but instead she got torn apart. Phew, thankfully not. The next chapter starts with Reiner saving her at the last moment. The problem is, he's about to fall himself, and the spot he's clinging to is breaking apart. She yells at him to stop being crazy, to take this part of the corpse, the most important one, and deliver it to the knight. The place where they're holding on is collapsing. But then, Man, the protagonist, a hero, he clamps onto the piece with nothing but his mouth, biting down on the bald man's arm. That's all he has left, a head and one arm. He's making garbled sounds while the bald man doesn't understand. All the while, the Titan is advancing, tearing through the city. People are being evacuated, and Leonard orders everyone toward the edges of the island. That's when the Queen shows up, asking how long his men can hold out. He answers that, at this rate, they won't last through the night. She asks about the corpse knight, and he says it looks like they're preparing to fight the Titan in a different way. The Queen remarks that, by the looks of it, everyone is going to die anyway, since this is an island with only one way in and out. At least if no one's left alive, there will be nobody around to judge her. Which in the end wasn't so bad, was it? Somebody please kill her. That's all I ask, is probably exactly what Leonard is thinking right then. The scene shifts to the production area. Our boy has a giant frog, handpiece clamped in his mouth. He latches it onto the bald man's head and sucks it into place. He says at least the adhesion works really well. Reiner explains that it's a weapon made from the arm of some lizard beast, meant to stick so he can climb. Meanwhile, the bald man thanks him for saving him. Gunther snaps back that he didn't save anyone. He only saved the body part he needed. He couldn't care less if the bald guy died, even if it left a huge scar on his head. The bald man only mutters that Gunther is always like this. There must have been at least one moment when he felt happy with someone else. He looks up and asks, "What the hell is this? Is he joking?" His relatives didn't even have the courage to kill him, so they threw what was left of the fetus onto a trash heap. Or maybe he was supposed to be happy in the arena, where the only choice was to kill or be killed. A place where the only value his life had was the money people bet on the winner. He tells him to stop joking, because there was never anything happy or interesting in his life. Until now, everyone around him was either trying to kill him or bring him down. And even then, he survived. Because even if the whole world wanted him dead, he would keep fighting and surviving. Nothing in the world mattered more than that. So he wants to compete and see who's still alive in the end, and he's sure it will be him. But Reiner then says that a life where all you want is to survive is a life with nothing in it. Gunther glares at him, but then the others announce that the parts are connected. The protagonist pulls the piece off his head and stands up with 4 arms. Eren calls out to him, but he doesn't answer. She finally says she'd like to see him tomorrow. He turns, says that's a joke, and leaves the room, staring straight at the Titan. Meanwhile, out at the edge of the city, almost falling into the sea, people can only watch as the Titan draws closer. Then suddenly it looks down and sees something, climbing up its leg. It's Gunther, rushing upward at full speed. The Titan swings its palm to crush him, but Gunther leaps, latches on with his extra hands and keeps climbing. He's fast now, already scaling the Titan's back. He knew that at this pace the monster wouldn't be able to grab him, but the thing is absurdly flexible. It slaps him and sends him flying. Gunther crashes to the ground, looks at his arm, and says it happened again. So he leaps back toward the Titan, scaling the bridge of rubble. The beast swings a fist, but he jumps, steps off a falling stone, and launches himself upward. He grabs hold again, with the lizard handpiece, but the weak lands another blow. He dodges underneath, moving along the other arm. More swings, come one after another. He slips around, but now it looks like he's been slammed into the ground. Except he hasn't, because when the monster punched, he clung to the edge of its hand. And there, beneath the strike, he notices something strange, like a hidden spot under the island. He doesn't understand why something so odd is there, but his thoughts are cut short as the beast violently shakes its arm, flings him to the ground, and comes down with another crushing blow. From far away, Aryan calls out Gunther's name, has already lost a leg. Gunther has already stopped losing limbs. Another strike tears through the city and slices off one of his lizard arms. The creature glares down as he screams in desperation, clinging on until finally he reaches the Titan's nape. At that moment, all he needs is for the monster to be distracted for 1 second. Right then, the Titan, about to grab him, suddenly looks aside as if it saw someone or something. It freezes for a brief moment, and that's when Gunther launches himself upward, landing on its head. The monster reaches to snatch him, but then something strange happens, because the next chapter begins with a little doll. A child holds it, saying she couldn't do anything while her brother was being beaten, because the monster in front of her was far too big. He was too strong, with muscles as hard as rock. Julius tells the child not to be afraid. They would create a world together, one where monsters didn't exist. And now, during the fight, we see that Miranda hesitated for a second, because on the wall he saw a child protecting her brother. That was the moment. He stopped attacking Gunther, and Gunther managed to launch himself on top. When the monster turned to catch him, he slipped through its hands and managed to enter through its eye. And in just a second, the thing collapsed right in front of everyone. Unbelievable. The protagonist only needed to get inside. That was it. Problem solved. Now he's walking around crippled, missing an arm and a leg. Yeah, but at least he killed it. The people in the city stare, unable to process what kind of body that was, or what kind of monster he had just taken down. Child who protected her brother asks if he's the one who killed the giant. He turns and says yes. What's the problem? Naturally, she thanks him, saying that thanks to him she survived, and her little brother is grateful too. Gunther simply ignores it and keeps walking. The scene shifts to Audrey praising him, asking how he managed to move so well with 4 arms. It was his first time fighting like that. He really is a naturally gifted warrior. If he had a better-looking face, they could easily put up a statue of him in the city, maybe even graft on a little hair while they're at it. Aryan, however, steps in from the side, puts her hand on his shoulder, and says she's relieved to see him safe again. He asks if she's sure, because her expression hasn't changed at all. What kind of atmosphere is this? Even Gunther is left confused. But then, look who barges in, apologizing for interrupting the pleasant mood. The Queen. She says that in the end, she was the one who killed the Iron Giant, but the damage was massive. Still, thanks to her extreme and precise evacuation order, almost no citizens died. Most of their weapons were destroyed, but at least the people survived. And now, she declares it's time to decide who should be held responsible for all this chaos. She asks Captain Rayner if he has any ideas. Word reached her that at a crucial moment, when he could have killed the vampire, he hesitated, and everything happened because of that. It sounds like a critical mistake, one that guarantees a public execution. My God, no way. Audrey begs for mercy, saying that even if her father was a mercenary, he had a soft heart and never killed anyone. But the Queen refuses, saying that unfortunately, someone must be punished for everything that happened. Gunther cuts in, saying the more he listens to this old hag, the crazier she sounds. Sure, the bald guy is a coward, but in his eyes, more blame belongs to the one who wasted troops preparing useless weapons and made it harder to find that a box. But of course, in front of everyone, she won't admit that. In the end, she's the one who nearly got everyone killed. The Queen glares at him, demanding to know what he's talking about. And then, out of nowhere, a man appears at her side, saying the Queen is still playing a role that doesn't suit her. Gunther realizes he didn't even notice the man approach. And before the Queen can understand anything, the protagonist's head is rolling across the ground. The stranger declares that he is the king's brother, the last surviving true royal, the one who failed to become king, known as Velvet Hound. And as part of the promise he made to Julius, he came here to take the immortal knight, a protagonist who's just ahead after fighting a 20-armed monster. No way. The next chapter opens, with soldiers being completely torn apart by this velvet. He tells them not to throw their lives away so uselessly. He is the last surviving royal. According to Julius, he has to take the immortal knight, so they had better not stand in his way. He is leaving without killing anyone. He shows them the head, saying they don't want to die over something like this. The knights reluctantly agree. They step aside because none of them could kill him anyway. That's when Olivia steps in front of him, saying she's heard the rumors that her uncle truly became a monster. He answers that she still seems to be suffering quite a lot, and what he wants to know is whether the Queen or the princess is really going to stand in front of him over that head. She looks him in the eyes and, of course, simply steps aside, as if she actually cared about that. Velvet walks past and then says, "The footsteps are noisy. True royalty makes no sound when it walks." And clearly that hit a nerve, leaving her shaking with anger. Velvet keeps moving, carried along while everyone watches. The crowd doesn't react. As Reiner says they have to. Stop this. If that man crosses the bridge and enters the forest, this place is finished. The forest is full of obstacles, hard to track through and even harder to fight in, and sunrise is coming soon. They have to buy time to get Gunther back. Reiner's daughter then yells, asking why he isn't running and is only walking. Velvet replies that true royalty never runs in front of others. Well then, they might as well keep following him and watching until the sun rises. He won't run. They follow him across the bridge until someone orders them to stop. It's Leonhard, standing face to face with nothing but courage. Velvet asks if he really means to block the path for the sake of a head, and Leonhard says, "Right." Velvet asks why. Leonhard answers that it's because that man is humanity's last hope. Velvet laughs, saying it's funny. Every human he has ever known lived only for themselves. In the end, the ones who hurt humans most are other humans. So why does Leonhard think it's worth throwing away his life for such vile creatures? Leonhard lowers his head, then suddenly lifts it and declares that even so, he still believes humanity is worth saving. No matter how dark the world is, he believes in the goodness of humans who never lose their light. And for those who only wanted to kill each other, he believed the light of the righteous would heal them. And it wasn't just him. All of them felt the same. They wouldn't stand there and let this choice turn them into monsters. Brave, no doubt, and even Velvet admits it. Velvet says it's a touching speech. Too bad that out of the 1,000 people in the city, only 5 are standing in front of him. Would that really be enough to stop him? Leonhard ignores the threat and tells Gunther that, since he saved him once, now it is their turn to do the same. And the charge. I honestly thought they had some strategy, some insane move. But no. Just before that, we see Leonhard thanking them for standing with him. They reply that since he saved their lives once, dying isn't frightening. What they fear more is dying without meaning. Leonhard assures them it will never be meaningless, even if they aren't anyone important, never written in history, and never the main characters of the world, even if they aren't great generals or kings. Maybe that tiny spark of courage will become strength for something greater. At least that's what he believes. The soldiers look at each other and smile, but then they're torn apart, lying on the ground with a leg gone and an arm severed. Beside them, Leonhard is down too, already missing an arm. Velvet walks past, saying they were arrogant, but he still finds their courage admirable, and that's why hell spare their lives. Because mercy, too, is the duty of royalty. He continues toward the forest, saying that, once inside, even royalty doesn't need to walk. It's the perfect place to hide from the eyes of prey. But then someone calls for him to wait. It's Arian. The king asks if she intends to fight him. She answers yes. He warns her that one act of mercy is already more than enough. If they fight, he guarantees she'll die. Gunther's head is right there, clearly trying to say something. And Arian answers that either way, they have no future without that head. So if they're going to do anything, it has to be trying to save it. Even though this was a man who had spent his whole life fighting alone, he looks at her and says it's just another touching confession. Strangely, she blushes a little. But then he draws his swords, saying that unfortunately, this is where she dies without hesitation. He swings to cut her down, but she only manages to raise her blade, to block, squinting one eye shut. Nothing happens. When she opens her eyes again, the sun has already risen and his arm is burning. Velvet realizes it. He had been caught in the shadow of one of the few trees near the forest. He mutters that if he'd taken just 50 more steps, he would have been safe. Just 50 steps, such a small distance, but such an important one. Now the queen is practically laughing at him, saying he truly is the face of real royalty. Pathetic and pitiful, hiding beneath a tiny tree, risking his life, terrified of death. He should have at least brought a low-class vampire along to shield him or something. But she is foolish to think that, since he was cast out of royalty without a single follower, of course he has no vampire. Velvet admits it. When her father exiled him, he was sent to an island with no one at his side. So, what will they do now? The queen says it's time to end a member of the royal family. Maybe she should chop down part of that tree or set the whole thing on fire. Velvet replies that destroying the tree to burn him in the sun isn't something honorable royalty would do. He never killed needlessly, and if he wanted to run, he could have escaped easily. But everything he does is to uphold the true honor of royalty. That's why being trapped under this tree is part of the process, defending his honor. For her to exploit that weakness and kill him in such a cowardly way would be unthinkable for a descendant of the royal line. Arian calls it sophistry, an argument made to look like the truth. I'm super intelligent, I definitely didn't just read that on Google. She says this man is trapped in the shadows only because the knights sacrificed themselves. They should cut down the tree now to finish him, and not ignore the honor and sacrifice of everyone who gave their lives. Velvet then declares that, as royalty, hell make an honorable suggestion. Arian keeps calling for Her Majesty while he asks if she'll listen. Strangely, the queen glances to the side, looks back at him, and her expression changes. The next chapter opens with someone calling her pathetic. Maybe it's him, mocking her for holding her fork 3 times during a meal, saying she knows nothing about etiquette. Now it's clear why her father didn't want her. She was never a vessel worthy of royalty, truly living up to the name Olivia the Fool. The scene shifts to her #1 fan, asking if she really accepted the offer. She answers that refusing something fair would be dishonorable, and this time she'll prove she's worthy of royalty. She then demands to know where Patrick was during all this chaos. She barely saw him at all. He hesitates for a moment before saying he was looking for a way to escape with her if things became too dangerous. She snaps back that she knows he was really securing an escape route for himself. Either way, he had better disappear from her sight without a word, or she'll have his arms and legs cut off, and he shouldn't forget that his grave will always be beside hers. He simply replies that he understands, and walks away. On the bridge, someone asks if they're really going to let that vampire live, and why. Arian explains it seems to be because they accepted the duel. Audrey finds it ridiculous, since that man was only trapped because of everyone's sacrifice. Arian answers that they have no choice but to accept. The bald man then asks what duel they're even talking about. The scene shifts back to the tree, where a man raises his arms and declares that he is the true warrior among warriors. He is John Bayer of the Bayer family, and he is there as the Great Queen's representative, ready to finish Velvet with his fists. That's when Arian explains it's an honorable fist duel. Basically, the two of them stand face to face, trading one punch at a time. Whoever takes a punch and then moves even one step afterward loses. Audrey understands. The whole point is to keep hitting each other until one collapses. What she finds ridiculous is that everyone's lives in the city are being gambled on such a stupid contest to decide humanity's future. Reiner says it doesn't matter. The goal is to get Gunther's head back, and that's what matters most. Normally, in this kind of duel, you send 4 representatives. But since Velvet is alone, obviously he'll fight every match himself. The bald one is optimistic, saying that since they can use 4 people, they still have a chance. All they need is to make him take 1 step. Bayer is psyching himself up, telling himself he can win. Since they've accepted the duel, all he has to do is make this guy take a single step. No matter how strong a vampire is, the face has no defense. If he lands the first hit, this guy will collapse. Then he'll win the duel, earn an even greater title, and maybe even aim for Emperor. Honor and money were right within reach. The announcer declares that both have accepted the duel. You can avoid a punch out of fear, but if you lose your balance and take a step, you're instantly the loser. Then he announces that the one who accepted the duel's challenge, Bayer, gets the first strike. Bayer shouts, saying this punch is for fame and honor, and slams it into the vampire's head. The crowd cheers, saying it was strong enough. And yeah, it really does shake Velvet's face, and he admits the punch was strong. But the announcer clarifies that Velvet didn't move or retreat. So now it's his turn. Bayer tries to say something, but then, bang, he takes a cannon-like punch to the head and is sent spinning away. Instantly, Velvet is declared the winner, while everyone wonders if Bayer just died. Patrick looks hesitant, while the Queen says she wasn't expecting much anyway. He only has to win once. The next challengers have already won duels like this, so she's eager to see what happens next. The second son of the Bruni family, Nikolai Brune, steps forward, a massive guy. Where the hell was this legend when the monster invaded? Or when that vampire woman was slaughtering everyone? Even Velvet admits this one actually looks stronger, while Nikolai thinks this fight isn't about strength. He needs to land a vital blow, create panic, and then it will be easy to make Velvet move. And the best vital spot at the start of the fight is the temple. The vampire really reels when he gets hit, his head twisting sideways. Audrey looks excited, but the chapter cuts off right there. Then the referee starts to call Nikolai the winner, until they see that even though Velvet's body twisted, he didn't move a single step. Nikolai insists it doesn't make sense. His whole back shifted, but the announcer says he didn't move a foot, so there's no problem. Nikolai starts to protest, and then, bam, he's sent flying, smashing into the ground. Another one down, and the crowd wonders if he's dead too. Then the third representative steps up, Joseph Rambler, and suddenly it hits me. Could the last duel actually be Reiner's daughter? She's tall, jacked, and built for it. Joseph says the most important thing in a duel like this is knowing your opponent. He studied the patterns, the habits, and now he's sure he knows how to win. A crucial weakness in Velvet's fighting style has been revealed. He grins, saying hell show it. Except yeah, he's already been blasted away too. We don't even see the punch he threw. Audrey complains that it makes no sense for everyone's lives in the city to be gambled away like this. Arian quietly adds that now all they can do is pray the last representative makes the difference. She asks who it will be, and Velvet immediately questions why it would be Gunther. His head belongs to him. He can't just hand it over. The Queen replies that she never said she would use the head. She never once said she wouldn't use Gunther himself. And since Velvet only has the head and not the body, clearly the body counts as the larger part of Gunther, so it can be used. Besides, as she swore in the name of royalty, if he wins the duel, he keeps the head. Or is he afraid of running away from this fight? In a dishonorable way. Looks like Gunther has gotten his head back, wondering what the hell this so-called duel of honor is supposed to be. And he can't understand why that Ronalton even let him go. Oh right, the vampire was probably covering his ears the whole time. From the background, the Queen declares that this is a fight of honor, something someone like him, who lived such a meaningless life, could never understand. He simply answers that he doesn't care to understand it anyway. The Queen then says that if he wins this duel, she won't execute the bald one. Of course, he has to win honorably. Audrey thanks her, and the Queen simply orders them to prepare. The duel will take place the moment the sun begins to set. Soon after, Gunther is testing out his new arm, asking what this strange sensation is. Arian explains that the arm is designed entirely for trunk rotation, transferring force into a punch. But he should be careful, because it was built in a rush and can break easily, and the colors are a little off, because those are the arms of the knights cut down when Velvet crossed the bridge. The protagonist feels uneasy, saying it's strange to have pieces of each of them like that, but she tells him it's actually incredible. After all, he himself said the most important thing was to keep living. He should be used to it by now. From the very beginning, his body and all its parts were built through the deaths and sacrifices of others. Hearing that, Gunther calms down and looks motivated again. And now they stand face to face as the announcer declares the final duel of honor. Velvet, off to the side, is thinking hard. He hadn't expected to end up in this situation, but he knew that stupid Olivia would try something like this. Everything so far had been within his expectations. On top of that, some of his many arms were gripping the bones of his lower leg, meaning even if his whole body was thrown back, his leg would stay planted. Basically, it was impossible for him to lose. Some would call it cowardice, but all he had to do now was keep going and watch these fools fall. This was his revenge for what her father had done to him. His dark thoughts are cut short by Gunther's fist flying toward his head at full speed. Velvet freezes, unable to process it. I think he forgot that if his head explodes, his body shuts down. And bang, a clean hit sends, his skull flying. Gunther asks if that means he won. The guy's head literally flew off, but the referee announces that Velvet didn't move a single step, so the duel isn't over. Gunther flexes his arm, grinning that this duel is going to be fun, while the vampire starts reconstituting, himself admitting that was dangerous, but saying the game is over now. No matter how much that Olivia tries, in the end she'll never be him. But we cut back to earlier when they were implanting steel rods inside Gunther's mouth. It was meant to help him withstand the blows. He said the taste was disgusting and weird, but Aryan told him not to worry. The duel wouldn't last that long. In fact, it would end much sooner than he thought, so he had better win. When Velvet's punch lands squarely, Gunther wonders why he hears a sharp metallic screech. The referee declares that Gunther didn't move a single step. So now it's his turn again. Gunther launches an uppercut, landing it cleanly on Velvet's jaw and blasting his head away once more. The vampire twitches slightly, but still doesn't move from his spot. Velvet reforms himself, snarling that Gunther is and smashes him with a punch. Patrick asks the queen if she truly believes Gunther can win, and she looks uncertain. Velvet's head goes flying again, and he almost takes a step back. He realizes this is getting dangerous. This strange knight is far stronger than he imagined, his whole body pushed back by a punch to the head. Velvet tries to find the right angle to land his own hits, but strangely, it feels like no real damage is being done. The word defeat drifts through his mind. As true royalty, he cannot lose to this filthy woman, unworthy of any title. With a twisted expression, he shouts for everyone to stop laughing. He was the only vessel worthy of becoming king. Only him, the one truly worthy of that position. Gunther, meanwhile, is chewing on the steel rods in his mouth, muttering that he doesn't care. Velvet spirals deeper into madness, ranting that that woman's father stole everything from him. And as if that weren't enough, he even severed his arms, stopping him from ever trying again. Gunther simply says the guy's family is completely insane. Velvet reconstructs another arm, declaring hell proved that fakes never win, and goes for another punch. But this time, Gunther dodges. Velvet is left stunned, and Gunther counters with a strike straight to his chest. Everyone gasps. The queen is speechless as Velvet is hurled away. He scrambles up, screaming that the Ko dodged and threw away all his honor. Gunther fires back that if Velvet is fighting with that whole mess of limbs strapped to his back, what right does he have to talk about honor? Besides, he only went along with this because of the bald one, but now he's tired of it. Velvet tries to restore his arm, but realizes he can't. Just like Gunther did with Evelyn in the circle, he damaged Velvet's heart, making full regeneration impossible. In that moment, Gunther grabs him by the neck in memory and says the real fight is about to begin. But again, Velvet insists that in the name of his noble family, he has another proposal. Gunther's response is to tell him to go to hell and blast him in the head again. The moment Gunther saw Velvet merging 15 arms into one, he probably gave up on fighting fair. For him, survival comes first. The queen, though, obviously wants to know why he dodged. Even if he died, even if humanity perished, he couldn't act like that while representing the royal family. She screams desperately that he's a... But Patrick steps in, telling her to calm down. Did she actually see Gunther dodge? He says what really happened was that Gunther took the punch head-on, and with the fourth strike, he finished Velvet. Everyone else nods along, yeah. That fourth punch was solid. He handled the third pretty well, too. Patrick even rewrites the record, tearing out the old page and scribbling down that after Gunther received the third punch, he countered with the fourth and ended the vampire. Patrick says that's the perfect outcome, then turns and declares, yes, that's the truth now. The queen, still confused, mutters that apparently she won honorably, and he agrees, telling her she kept her honor intact. And there she is, smiling like a fool, celebrating and saying the victory is hers, with everyone honoring the great queen. Meanwhile, Gunther is still pounding Velvet into the ground while the vampire begs him to stop, asking how long hell keep beating someone with no arms. Doesn't he pity a helpless enemy? Gunther calmly replies that hell just keep hitting him until sunrise. Nothing more, nothing less. Velvet, desperate, pleads for him to wait a moment, saying he has a proposal and only wants the boy to listen. But Gunther nearly caves his face in again until Velvet suddenly blurts out the name Julius, the last pure-blooded vampire. He knows everyone must be searching for him, and Velvet claims he knows where Julius is hiding. If they spare him, he can lead them there, because once Julius is gone, they won't have to fight any more vampires. Humanity will be victorious. Gunther says he's not an idiot. If Julius dies, Velvet dies too, so there's no way he would do that. But Vampire explains that Gunther doesn't understand how vampire promises work. He swore to Julius that he would deliver the immortal night, meaning what happens between those two afterward isn't his responsibility. He insists this is a great deal for Gunther. Gunther pauses, saying it's tempting. But how about he takes a few more punches before sunrise? Velvet screams. And with that, the sun is already up. Arian presses him, wanting to know if hell really guide them to Julius. Bound in chains, Velvet says yes, but in truth, his plan is to lead the immortal knight straight to Julius. The only thing he asks is to be treated as the last surviving royal. They should remove all the chains and shackles because they're dishonorable. The protagonist scoffs, saying this poor ass dares talk about honor after everything he's done. Sounds like he's begging for another beating. Velvet flinches when he sees the raised fist, then decides to shut his mouth. Arian says he can't be trusted. After all, if Julius dies, Velvet dies too, so that promise doesn't even make sense. What she really wants to know is whether Velvet didn't want to destroy humanity. Why did he become a vampire? Twisting his face strangely, he calls her a very curious girl. But it's a shame royalty has always kept so many secrets. Gunther just raises his arm, saying he's clearly playing word games and deserves another hit. Velvet tells him to stop with the threats, insisting all he wants is to be spared in exchange for taking them to Julius. That's the deal. Later, walking through the corridors, Arian says it would be a huge advantage to know where Julius is and take him down. The only problem is that before that, there's a lot to prepare. And just then, her nose starts bleeding. Not only blood, but a mix of purple and red, and she starts collapsing to the ground. We've forgotten what was said in the very first chapter. She's a life battery, which means her life force is being drained. The others rush to carry her, her whole body flushed red. She can barely breathe, her body heat is burning, and strange marks cover her skin. That's when Gunther notices a mass of implants along her back. He asks what that is, and the bald man explains it's the result of her becoming a human generator. A tale of drugs, potions, and all kinds of substances was pumped into her body. The devices on her back detoxify the damage caused by those drugs, which lets the energy flow through the transmitter. On top of that, her intestines and organs are all compressed by the machinery. The only thing she can eat is certain kinds of soup. Gunther mutters that the fact she's still alive is already a miracle. Raina adds that this is why Arian is unique. No normal person could have survived all this, and yet she endured days and nights in that body. Still, Gunther wants to know why she collapsed and whether she'll recover. The bald man says first they need to understand the source of her body heat and what's actually happening. Then he asks Gunther if he's worried about her. Gunther shouts, hell no, he's worried because if she dies, he dies too. The bald one immediately realizes he doesn't actually care about her. One of the plague doctors then reports that her pulse has finally returned to normal, but they still don't know the cause of the collapse, so all they can do is wait and see. Meanwhile, Gunther is there, hooked up, saying there's a problem. He knows she's unconscious, but the bar on her arm isn't rising. The bald one tells him he should be ashamed of connecting to someone who's unconscious. Gunther snaps back that there's no way. What? She just dies out of nowhere. That's when the bald man explains that, just like him, she has to run at high efficiency for the transmission to work. The worse her body gets, the weaker the output becomes, until eventually it shuts down completely. The protagonist asks if there's no way for him to charge himself, and the bald man admits that, yeah, for now there isn't. The only advantage is that the bar isn't dropping, which means Gunther has to stay fully connected to her just to stay alive. The bald man warns that he's not even sure that's possible. If her condition worsens even a little while, he keeps draining power. The battery might still fall to zero while connected. Gunther mutters that this is a worse death than fighting vampires. The bald one agrees, saying since Gunther can't leave, he might as well stay and watch over her while everyone else mobilizes to find another solution. Gunther has no choice. He's stuck at her side, just watching. Every moment, the counter on his arm shows less than an hour of life. He notices her groaning, drenched in sweat. Clearly, she's in unbearable pain. They tell him to use a cloth to wipe away her sweat, but complains it's a hassle. Still, he notices her face, so small. Her nose, her mouth, even her hands are tiny. And yet she endured the agony of having her organs twisted and her entire body modified. He just can't understand why she's going through all this. Just then, Audrey opens the door with more water and sees Gunther holding Arian's hand. She apologizes for interrupting a romantic moment. He shouts that he was only wiping sweat. Audrey tells him to enjoy his time and closes the door out of nowhere. Desperate, he yells for her to come back. But night falls and he's still there, wiping away the sweat. He wonders aloud if she, who always acted so tough, like nothing ever bothered her, is really just going to pass out beside him like this. He sits there, staring at her as the hours slip by. And he remembers her words, that she hoped to see him tomorrow. Gunther grows sentimental, clasps his hands together, stares at her, and admits that out of everyone, she's the only one he wanted to see tomorrow too. But then the sun rises and he panics. He's prayed, he's wiped her sweat all night, but she still hasn't woken up. Worse yet, even while connected, the timer on his arm is dropping. Raina steps in, saying they can't waste any more time. They'll have to use the last option. Gunther demands an explanation, and Raina tells him Arian's human generator can no longer function. Before it shuts down completely, they mobilized everyone to create a new one. She's carried off while people warn them to handle her carefully. Gunther follows close behind until they stop at a gravestone covered in names. He asks what it is. Raina explains it's the list of everyone who sacrificed themselves trying to become a generator and failed. Gunther curses, saying it's disgraceful that so many people died just to have their names carved in a forgotten place. The bald man explains that not everyone trusted the plan. At that moment, 2 plague doctors enter, announcing that the test is ready and the candidate is prepared. Gunther immediately protests, saying that with just one, it's impossible. There's no way it will work. But Raina says they don't have enough materials, so there's only enough to try with one person. Gunther frowns, saying it's suspicious that only one person volunteered. Who's the idiot this time? And sure enough, from the start of the speech, Gunther already knows. Raina admits that all his life he's been indecisive, just like when he couldn't kill that vampire. Time and again, he made the wrong choices because he never had the resolve. And he's tired of running away like that. He wants to protect Audrey, so this time hell do what must be done. He's the one who will become the human generator to save Gunther. And it looks like our boy only agreed because the bald one was already prepared, saying that creating a human generator doesn't take that long. Even if it doesn't work perfectly, the moment everything is installed, he might still be able to draw out some energy. Gunther asks what happens if it doesn't work at all. Raina just tells him not to. Worry, everything will be fine. The doctors take him away, saying the operation is about to restart. As he's led off, Raina asks Gunther to please keep all of this a secret from Audrey. Next scene, his veins and fingernails are turning blue, and he's scratching at himself, writhing in agony on the table. Gunther demands to know what's happening, and the others explain it's a complete success. The first operation worked, and now they'll move on to the second. Gunther mutters, well, good. It's not over yet. He asks the bald man how it feels to be a blue bald man. Raina replies that it's terrible, at least the first phase only, had a 50% success rate. And since he's still alive, that counts as a good result. The protagonist praises him, telling him to keep that positive attitude. Raina then asks how much energy he has. He looks down at his wrist and says not much, just a tiny flicker. He tries to sit up, saying he has something to confess while he's still conscious. Gunther grumbles that he doesn't want to hear any deathbed secrets, but Raina goes on anyway. Audrey isn't his biological daughter. Gunther is shocked, saying that explains why. They seem so different. But if she isn't his, then where did she come from? Raina explains that he had been abandoned by the mercenaries he spent his whole life with. After losing everything, he lived on the streets. And what truly broke him wasn't losing material things, but being betrayed by the people he considered family. He was left to die on the streets until someone offered him a piece of bread. That someone was Audrey. He remembers her tiny, dirty hand holding out half a loaf to him. She had also been abandoned by her parents, but he's grateful to them because it meant he could become her father, just as he had been abandoned and was able to rebuild his life thanks to Audrey. He hopes that in this cruel and merciless world, Gunther will eventually meet someone who can heal his wounds. Gunther grows serious at that. The doctors enter and announce that the second operation is about to begin. A stretcher is wheeled off into a room full of strange tools and bubbling vats, while Raina screams in agony. From a distance, Audrey stands by a window, as if she senses something. Gunther, still linked to Aryan, says that in this world, nothing is more valuable than staying alive. His energy runs out and he powers down. And then, oh no, the scene shifts to the gravestone. Someone comes and carves a new name into it. Raina Fallgaze. 5 hours and 4 minutes. That's how long he lasted as a human battery. Officially, he was recorded as a failure, but he still managed to provide power for 12 days. Some called it a miracle, while others said it was sheer willpower. And on the 11th night, another miracle happened. Erin suddenly woke from her deep coma. She was severely weakened, but by the next day she could function again as a generator. The moment Raina saw her standing, his own health collapsed even faster. Maybe he was relieved then. Finally, lying in bed, he tells his daughter he never imagined living could be so painful. But even so, in this cruel and merciless world, she had come to him and become his light. He thanks his daughter, who is smiling at him, and memories flood his mind. The little campfire, her words, her wiping his bald head, they're dancing. And at last, he tells her she was always far too beautiful. Then he dies. Here comes the worst part of all. Audrey didn't even cry when she saw him die. She said it had been his choice, and in the end it was thanks to her father that Gunther stayed alive until Aryan woke up. She said she would have done the same. But of course, later that night in the house, they heard her crying. The next day, Gunther is beside Aryan, asking if tomorrow they'll finally set out to kill Julius. A lot has happened. She answers yes. They're out of time, and Velvet warned it would take several weeks to reach him. Gunther says that finally everything is about to end. But she seems strangely calm. Not only did she nearly die, but the bald one died too. She closes the book in her hand and says she never would have started any of this if she hadn't been prepared. Gunther nods, saying he understands. Still, it's good to see her face again. He just warns her not to collapse out of nowhere again. She laughs. And a little later, he's lying in bed while she sits quietly at his side, watching the door. Someone is about to enter. But suddenly Gunther already has his sword at their throat, demanding to know why the Queen's lackey is here at this hour. The man chuckles that Gunther really is tough, but tells him not to worry. He isn't there on the Queen's orders. He came to offer his condolences and to say that he too owed much to Captain Raina. Gunther glares, pointing out that he acts very differently when he's near the Queen. The man answers that people are defined by the positions they're placed in, and Hell take that as a compliment. He heard they're leaving tomorrow, but before Gunther goes, someone desperately wants to see him. Gunther says Hell wake Aryan so they can go together, but the man says no one else can come. Gunther explains the timer, saying he has to stay close to her so his battery doesn't drain. Is this meeting really more important than saving humanity? Patrick answers yes. The one who wants to see him is more important than humanity's future. He is humanity itself and history itself. He is the King of Kings, the ancestor of mankind. Is Gunther curious about what really happened between humans and vampires? If he comes now, he'll learn everything. As they head down a flight of stairs, Gunther grumbles about this King of Kings nonsense. How many kings did this nation have? It feels like he meets more people here calling themselves kings than actual normal people. Patrick tells him to calm down, saying this person is different. He really is the true king who once ruled humanity. He was the embodiment of truth itself. Gunther asks if Patrick doesn't worship the queen. Patrick laughs and asks if he really thinks she looks like someone capable of leading anyone. Gunther calls him a funny hair, and Patrick thanks him. They arrive at a lavish but half-abandoned place, and Gunther remembers. It looks like the structure supported by the pillars he saw during the battle. He wants to know why they're here. Patrick explains that this place is deep below, somewhere that technically doesn't exist in history. Built with expensive marble, onyx, and countless jewels, the air circulation was so perfect, no one would notice it was underground. They even had fresh water. There were enough rooms for hundreds of servants to live there. In truth, the entire city known as Bahau was built to serve this place. Gunther demands to know what exactly this place is. Patrick explains that it was where the kings of the past went before death, a place where they could live eternal lives. It was called the Paradise of Kings. Gunther still doesn't get it, saying none of this makes sense, but Patrick just tells him to keep going. They move through more corridors, and Gunther sees strange paintings, scenes that look like vampire transformations, until finally, in one of the rooms, he comes face to face with a guillotine, a huge blade fixed in place. Patrick says Julius belonged to this place. Gunther asks if that's the pureblood vampire, and Patrick explains yes. A being that survives only on pure human blood, burns in sunlight, and can only be killed if the heart is destroyed. For vampires, blood was the source of strength and power. Pureblood vampires were creatures that had existed since the very beginning, and they didn't even need to drink blood. They could live eternally while consuming anything. Noble, wondrous beings that, until then, had existed only in mythology. But eventually, they discovered something incredible about those purebloods. Just as human blood gave strength to vampires, the blood of a pure blood could give strength to a human. Gunther doesn't understand, and Patrick explains that yes, pure blood could grant youth and extend human life. Basically, you could live forever if you kept drinking it. Gunther asks if everyone in that place survived because of it. Patrick explains no, only a chosen few, the king, and a handful of servants. Because pureblood blood was like a mirage. The moment it left the body, it disintegrated. That's why, to keep fresh blood available, they needed a way to obtain it at any time. Julius was imprisoned there and constantly decapitated so he would not remain conscious. He supplied blood to humans for 950 years. Gunther mutters that now he doesn't even know who the real monster is. Patrick says it was all worth it. Thanks to Julius, humanity entered its greatest age of prosperity. The royal family gained influence over politics and administration, and any king on earth nearing death was sent to that place. He was judged by the kings below, who decided whether his life was valuable enough to be made eternal. Knowing about this judgment, every king pushed himself to create the best kingdom possible and earn immortality. The one who created this system was Hound, the very first of all kings. Gunther scoffs, saying first that royal family lost their minds. Second, someone really screwed up, since clearly their plan didn't last forever. He wants to know what happened. Patrick explains it was 41 years ago, when a human granted Julius freedom and escaped with him. Gunther says, finally, a human with a conscience. But Patrick shakes his head, saying it doesn't make sense. Conscience? That's exactly what he didn't have. Just imagine the suffering unleashed because he freed that vampire. Of course, the moment Julius was gone, that underground city began to collapse. The source of eternal life was cut off, and the people there aged decades all at once. They all died grotesque deaths, one after another. It started with the first king, and soon after, the second one, called Prouse, died as well. But the last hope of them all, the one who had devoted thousands of years to humanity, the true King of Kings, was still alive. And now it was time for Gunther to come face to face with the very history of humanity itself. Inside a room packed with books, Someone says they've been watching him for a long time, born from death, endlessly yearning for life, alive but not fully, dead but not completely either, existing right on the line between life and death. So-called death might welcomes him to his palace. The protagonist immediately blurts out that this weirdo is ugly as hell, and the guy replies that he could say the same about him. Our boy is curious now though. What's this about being watched for so long? For someone meant to be a great king, he sure lives quietly. The king explains that he doesn't just watch him, he keeps track of everyone's lives. When they were born, who raised them, what kind of lives they lived, and how those lives ended. That is his power to know and understand everything within this kingdom. Gunther straight up calls him a creep, then presses him. If he already knows everything, why does he want to see him? With that strange expression on his face, the king reaches for a book and says this is the story of Isabella Hound and her life. She was a woman who was about to become this kingdom's great queen, but she gave up the throne and chose to run away with Julius. The book is still unfinished, and one of my greatest wishes is to complete it. That is why I want you to ask Julius about her. What did she promise him that made him want to destroy humanity? Gunther just shrugs it off, saying it's no mystery. The guy probably wants to wipe out humanity after having his head chopped off for 950 years. But the king explains that pure-blood vampires don't feel hatred. For someone like Julius, 950 years isn't even that long. The real reason he wants to kill humanity is because of a promise he made to Isabella Hound. She gave up eternal life and the throne just to tell him something. What that was, the king still doesn't know. What interests him, though, is seeing what choice Gunther makes, whether he chooses to live or die. After all, he can go on as a human or as a monster. He could even pursue eternal life. And since he loves surviving, that is what piques the king's curiosity. Gunther doesn't answer. Truth is, up until now, he's been pretty questionable whenever survival was on the line. But here we are. Golden weapon loaded, sword drawn. Arian says the time has come, and he only asks if she's been sleeping. Well, she says yes, thanks. And he just tells the Washgat's girl to snore a little quieter. Blushing, she ignores the jab and mentions that Velvet is going with them, which means Julius will know their location at any moment. Gunther sees that as a double-edged sword. Arian also points out that the moment they leave this castle, every monster out there will start hunting them. Risky, sure, but better than turning this whole place into a battlefield while they're still inside. And with that, they're already on the bridge when someone calls out to Gunther. It's Audrey, apparently going with them too. She's all cheerful, a dead giveaway she's going to die. He notices she cut her hair. She says she just wanted a small change. To him, it looks exactly the same, but whatever. Funny enough, for someone who usually doesn't care about others, our protagonist is paying a lot of attention. He asks how Velvet is, and she explains that obviously he's been avoiding her at the manor. When he goes to check, the guy is shouting, claiming he's insane for treating royalty like that. But Gunther just shows his fist, and the man immediately shuts up. The doctors then say it's time to leave. The carriage starts moving forward, while Gunther remembers the king's words: live, die, remain a monster, or chase immortality. He was curious about all of it. With a small chuckle, he presses on, while from one of the fairway towers, the queen watches before, turning away. At the same time, Julius is calmly waiting, at his home still as ever, for the two of them who are on their way. One step forward, and we move on to the next chapter, where someone's already shouting, wanting to know what this 582-kilometer thing is about. Velvet says that's the distance between them and Julius. The protagonist snaps back. What kind of nonsense is that? Do these vampires not know how to set up bases somewhere accessible? Not to mention, this carriage will travel, what, 50 kilometers total? At this pace, they'll get there in a month. Doesn't that one Julius know they're coming for him? Why doesn't he run toward them too and give them a hand? Velvet answers that he said Julius should run, but in truth, he just doesn't understand the complexity of a pure-blood vampire. He has always stayed in the exact same place, except for that one time he killed the king. And hell remained there. The protagonist wants to know if there's some treasure there or something like that. Velvet tells him no, it's where Isabella Hound was buried, and that instantly clicks with Gunther. That's the one the king mentioned, the one who freed Julius from that place. At the same time, another girl is clinging to him, clearly exhausted. The journey has barely started, and she's already asleep. Meanwhile, someone else is pointing at him, saying something beautiful is happening. He tells her to cut it out. The poor girl just fainted. He moves her head away from him. Suddenly, the horse jolts and Audrey slams her back against the wall, all twisted up. But once again, she sees Gunther shielding Aryan. He mutters that he has to protect her. If she dies, he dies. Sometime later, the driver warns them about something ahead. The place is littered with countless corpses, a pile of dead bodies. He tells them to move away. As they approach, the smell of blood hangs heavy. It's fresh. The strangest thing is, the bodies have no bites or cuts. They look crushed. Gunther warns everyone to stay alert because there's a vampire nearby. He also says to collect the usable bodies. Maybe they can craft a weapon for him. That's when Audrey notices something odd. All the corpses are missing their hands. From inside the carriage, Velvet says this is going to get fun now that they've entered that person's domain. She asks who, and he explains that among the high-ranking vampires, there are two weird, crazy ones. One of them is Nesh No-Hands, a filthy former slave everyone hated dealing with. But one thing was undeniable, he had a real knack for killing. Velvet wants to see how many of them survive this fight. And they better not forget, they still have 582 kilometers to go. Moving on, Audrey is sure this road to Julius won't be easy. They'll need to avoid fights as much as possible. And one of the most important things, as Aryan says, is protecting the incredible black carriage. It's basically a simplified Baha laboratory. Medicine, pieces of Gunther's weapons, they can make anything in there. Obviously, it needs to stay intact. Gunther, however, says the real priority is her, not the carriage. And as always, Audrey is there, watching all this romance unfold. The protagonist thanks her, though. It's easier to protect this small carriage than hold off an entire army. At that moment, someone points out that the thing is designed to withstand shockwaves, when suddenly someone yells, "Ambush!" Looking back, a plague doctor runs over to warn them that a vampire is coming. Gunther is already moving toward it, but stop, telling the others to get ready. From afar, another carriage comes flying, smashing into them from behind, and right after, something else slams down and destroys everything. Seeing that, Gunther wonders what the hell kind of vampire this is. It looked like a giant hand, and there he was, standing on top of all the fingers, saying 30. That was today's target. He had to hit 30. Gunther can only think about how disgusting the creature is. Lack of hair at least means it's a low-class vampire. Right away, he focuses, because the thing comes at him swinging 5, 6 hands, and he mutters that there are countless ways to kill something that weak. He flashes first toward the fingers, while the guy remarks that his strength feels strange, like he's not human. But no one can hurt this body Nesh has given him, until the sword pierces through, slicing the hand, tearing both apart at once. And another fist comes from the side and hurls him away. The creature, strangely enough, starts celebrating, bragging that he already has 2 for today. But the celebration is cut short as Gunther closes in within a second. He realizes these eggs are unpredictable, just like a human hand. The problem is, they're massive. Then he sees 3 of them heading toward the way carriage. The horses are running at full speed, the driver yelling to go faster because more freaks are closing in. From behind, another swings down to crush him. But Gunther is there again, cutting through. He asks how many vampires there are, and someone answers around 30. Seeing the guy holding a crossbow, Gunther asks if the fool really thinks that thing will kill vampires. If he truly wants to live, he should drop that useless weapon and grab his steel chain instead. One of the plague doctors begs for mercy, but has his head smashed in by one of those giant hands. And the creepy vampire, using his massive thumb, grabs the man's tiny hand and announces that's the 12th of the day. Still far from his goal. He glances aside, sees the carriage rolling by, and orders everyone to follow. Fingers are running along the sides, others coming from different angles, while Gunther slashes in every direction, grabs some chains, and spins them around, tearing everything apart. At the same time, he keeps himself anchored to the carriage, pulls forward, and dodges another strike. He snaps the chain around his arm, uses it to sling himself ahead, slicing through 3, maybe 4 more in a flash. The doctors inside are stunned that someone can cause this kind of destruction with just a chain. He really is a monster. They think this is going to be easy, and then he's suddenly ripped away. Arian is right there when, apparently, it's just a flicked stone shooting through the window. What the hell? The Jikichi declares the next one's coming. The shot fires. Gunther sees it heading straight for the carriage, tries to intercept it, swings his sword at the stone, but blood bursts out. The next chapter opens. That very moment, his slash failed and the horses were shredded in half. As the first collapsed, the others tripped, forcing the carriage to a stop. He quickly asks if everyone inside is okay, and they say yes. The problem is, obviously the horses are gone, so they're screwed. Another shot nearly hits Gunther as he dodges aside, spotting the Kikags up in the mountains. The group tries to raise the horses again, but he knows there's no time. The only option is to send the whole thing rolling down the slope. People inside are yelling, demanding to know what he thinks he's doing, asking if he's about to throw them all off the mountain. He just says yes and tells them to hold on. Then he shoves hard, jumps on top, and they go crashing, down at full speed. Poor Arian is drooling everywhere, while he mutters that this ride is way faster than he expected. The real problem? A huge boulder lies ahead. One doctor shouts that they're all going to die. Gunther tells him to calm down, tilts to the side, and slams his foot down to steer. They barely miss it, scraping the edge, but then the whole thing rides up the mountainside, and everyone screams in panic. That's when Audrey spots a bridge just off to the side. The idea is obvious. Cross that Huashi thing and cut off the vampire's path before they can catch up. The problem was, they were flying toward the cliff at full speed, and nobody was going to survive that. Arian, of course, screams his name again, begging him to stop this, while our boy goes full Spider-Man, pulling on the chains and trying to stop the runaway ride. Obviously, there's no way he's actually going to pull that off. Everyone was about to die, right? Though knowing this story, it really does like killing people off. But somehow, they stop right at the very edge, barely. So, there he is, hauling everyone back up with chains. I was about to say everyone inside was just being lazy, but no. They're all on the back, helping out. That's when one of the doctors warns them that the little hands are rushing in, desperate, with at least 2 fingers worth charging. At least they manage to cross before the fight kicks off. And now it's time to bring the bridge down. Gunther rushes forward, slams his blade into one pillar, then another, but somehow the bridge holds. The pillars must be anchored deep in the ground. Arian yells for him to smash the earth along with it. The problem is, he's running out of energy, and this has to be settled with one last punch. He stretches his arm, the creature's charging across the bridge, and he slams down into the ground. The whole thing collapses. The cursed little hands tumble into the water, carried away by the current. Arian calls out to him immediately, but he insists there's no way in hell. He's dying here, and then he passes out. Meanwhile, the remaining hands crawl out of the forest, and the ones made from that special blood burn away, leaving only the one controlling them. They retreat to a cave, carrying a few severed fists, and report directly to Lord Nesh. He says it was decent work, but why does it look like nobody hit their quota today? And yeah, we can already tell what this is. He's a filthy ex-slave who had his hands cut off. There's no way it wasn't unfair and cruel. Now he wants an army of hands to get his revenge. The underling apologizes, explaining that some half-monster knight got in the way. They lost plenty of comrades and couldn't reach the target. Nesh demands to know what nonsense this is. How could they fail with the perfect bodies they'd been given? For not reaching the goal, every one of them would pay with their lives. Vampire begs for forgiveness, while Nesh declares hell take all their hearts. The poor fools in the back are sobbing, promising they'll double the quota next time. But suddenly, Nesh starts muttering, saying something about the fist. I have no idea what he means, but he asks if the guy is certain. The man swears he saw it. Nesh thanks him and says that this time they'll be spared. Everyone drops to their knees, overjoyed to live another day, drooling in their madness. Nesh asks what the mission will be next time. He stares at a single hand, and his expression changes. He declares 10,000. Apparently the hand itself gives the mission. I don't really get it, but eventually his story ties everything together. At least it never leaves loose ends. Back with the carriages, the group is moving along the edge of the forest. The protagonist gives Velvet a smack, asking if he's okay. Velvet just answers that there are still 578 kilometers left. At this rate, unless they fall into some portal, it's never going to happen. After that whole breakneck descent down the mountain, they'd only covered 4 kilometers. Arian is at least thankful they protected the carriage, but Velvet says from inside that he doubts it. At this pace, they won't even make 100 kilometers. They have to push themselves much harder if the Death Knight's head is going to stay calm. He's laughing like some deranged psycho, while Gunther admits it's annoying, but the Hucks are telling him the truth. At this rate, there's no chance they'll survive 100 kilometers. The horses are the biggest problem. They're incredibly vulnerable and get killed too easily. And that's when Audrey offers the strangest idea. They've got plenty of corpses, so why the hell don't they make a horse? Okay, maybe building one from scratch, right? Looks like they want to turn Gunther into a horse, and he's definitely not thrilled about it. Strangely enough, Arian admits it's true. Turning him into a big stallion would make things much easier. The problem, obviously, is how long it takes to pull that off. Audrey chimes in, telling him to relax, she'll handle it quickly. Seriously though, nobody's going to ask the poor guy if he even wants to become a horse. The poor Shakti is about to be turned into some centaur-looking mess while they crawl along at 5 kilometers an hour. Meanwhile, the cursed little hands are charging in, desperate to find that guy and hit their quota. They're about to clash again, though technically from behind this time, since the freaks are closing in from the rear. Gunther is half-modified now, with weird stuff sticking into him, steel rods everywhere. He tells Audrey to hurry up, but she insists she's already doing her best, trying to finish as fast as she can. One of the hands suddenly leaps up, screaming for 10,000 fists aimed at Gunther. He glares back, and I don't even know what just happened. Did he block it? Although he lifted up a massive horse kick. Even Demon's shocked, asking what the hell that was. The thing gets crushed, stomped flat. Those are some seriously muscular horse legs. The design is insane, and Gunther is actually liking it, saying that with this, he feels like he can wipe everything out. Arian is about to tell him to stall for time, but instead she sees him running around like a madman, slashing through everything, demanding to know who's been talking about killing him. He stomps one of the creature's faces in with that giant horse hoof, spins around, and almost kills Arian by accident. She yells at him to watch his side. The monsters are already scattering, fleeing in terror. They're screaming that there's a monster here and begging for help. Gunther wonders aloud if he really looks that hideous. This whole cursed mess was way too tedious. Time to get back on track. But just as Arian is about to say maybe things will stay calm today, a strange roar echoes out. Nesh is nearby, muttering that 10,000 really is a lot, but they're only making it worse for themselves by trying to run. He turns to one of his followers, asks what the quota is, and then runs an arm straight through him, adding that hell take his heart as a bonus. Gunther wastes no time. He's already on him in a second, his sword strike nearly reaching the guy's eye. But before that, we saw him asking Velvet why this freak collects fists. Velvet explained it wasn't anything mystical. It came from a baron in some rural area who forced slaves to work on a peculiar plantation. If they couldn't hit the quota, he'd cut off their hands. It didn't matter if they were children, elderly, women, or men. Everyone died back then. Velvet swears that if he'd been king, something like that would never have happened. But Nesh is the kind of twisted person who whispers corruption into children's ears. He stares at that severed hand like he's hearing some eerie voice. Velvet always wondered who that strange hand originally belonged to. And then comes Gunther's strike. The one that nearly connects gets stopped by a blade. Nesh sneers that it can't end like that. The slaves aren't here anymore. Then he drives a blow into Gunther's chest, declaring that now it's his turn to settle this. Weird vampire energy starts swirling around his body, transforming him into some grotesque megazord covered in giant hands. He warns that today he's taking Gunther's hand and his fist. It's time to dance. Gunther fires back boldly that plenty of people have tried to kill him, but none have ever managed it. He's faced far stronger foes and lived through it. He charges forward, sword ready. Nesh simply declares that today will be the boy's first death, slamming a massive fist down toward him. But the next chapter opens with Arian saying, vampire blood almost has a will of its own. Gunther realizes they're like tools with consciousness, and she explains that's why they grow stronger when pain and willpower grow stronger too. Then she asks what kind of pain would cause the greatest suffering for a human. Audrey says being burned alive is probably one of the worst. Maybe also having absolutely no hope left in life would be unbearable. And apparently this is back when Raina was alive, because he says he once heard a scream. A scream that didn't sound human at all. It wasn't coming from the throat. It was like it came from deep inside the heart, something animalistic. It came from a mother who had just lost her child in an accident. The three of them fall silent, and he says it made him think again. Maybe the most painful thing for a human is the heart of a parent, one forced to watch their child die. Yeah, and of course, Nesh, the handless, saw his own child lose their hands and die right in front of him. That kind of thing could really turn anyone into a villain. And now here he is, using every ounce of strength he has to blow apart Gunther's arm. Gunther, of course, realizes it won't be that simple. Nesh seems almost disappointed, saying Gunther destroyed the fist, but he had to take it. How is he supposed to reach his quota now? He needs to control his legs better. But in the middle of that thought, Gunther interrupts him with a horse kick, slamming him, then unleashing another strike, and another, and another. The kid is pulling off a full Mortal Kombat combo, and yet the monster stands untouched, asking if that's really all the rage he has. The protagonist doesn't get it, how this creature hasn't even flinched, hasn't hesitated for a second. Strangely, as Nesh draws closer, Gunther feels something unsettling. He knows no enemy is without weakness, yet for some reason he feels intimidated. Deep down, he knows he can't beat this guy right now. That's when Aryan shouts from the back, telling him they finished packing everything. There's no reason for him to keep fighting. And he looks at her, remembering he's always been the one who chooses survival over anything else. With horse legs, he runs faster than anyone, sprinting at full speed. But of course, an attack tears through his chest, blasting open a crater. From afar, Nesh calls out that he still has 10,000 fists to collect. So where does Gunther think he's going? Then bam, it looks like it hit his head. Blood pours down, and wondering if it really struck his face and how exactly he was hit. There's an eye on the ground. Only half his head was torn away, but the brain is still intact. The problem is, his other eye is swollen shut, leaving him blind ahead. He can sense something charging toward him, but there's no way he's going to die like this. He leaps, shouting that no one is capable of killing him, and swings to punch back. But truthfully, he doesn't even know what he's aiming at. Just like that, the next chapter begins, because every time something happens, it flips. Now we see Gunther in a pool of blood surrounded by corpses. A fallen man asks why. The child is still fighting. Killing or dying changes nothing in his life. So why struggle so hard to run from death? Does he really believe hell ever find a place where he belongs? Or maybe he clings to the illusion that there's some way to take revenge on the parents who abandoned him in the trash. Gunther snaps at him to shut up, but the man only says he's a whiny child who's never felt love. There's no place for him in this world, no matter how hard he tries. No one has ever wanted him. With that, Gunther swings at him, and we're back at the moment of impact. His strike nearly hits Aryan, who screams, grabs hold of him, and tells him he doesn't need to fight anymore. Hare's left confused, wondering how he can stay alive, like this when he can't see. She tells him she'll be his eyes. She climbs onto his back, and together, they charge forward at full speed. The danger, though, is that the stones ahead could skewer him, and if that happens, she'd suffer too. But when the first one comes, she shouts for him to duck, and they dodge again. But then Nesh leaps, and nearly stomps right on top of them. They run in a panic. Gunther can't understand what the hell this fight even is. How is he supposed to predict anything when he can't see a thing? He wonders if maybe this is how hell die, without understanding a single thing happening around him. Maybe this is the horrible death he'd always been waiting for. But Aryan grabs him, telling him that this time he isn't alone, and he doesn't need to worry. She calls for him to dodge left. He just follows her words. Moving blind, she warns that the carriage is 5 meters to the left, and he just needs to go a little farther and plant his foot forward. He screams out desperately, and from Nesh's point of view, they're already far off in the distance, fleeing. Nesh mutters that the war really is slippery, and now it's complicated. He needs 10,000 fists to hit his quota. Still, fine. Hell chase him every night until they're exhausted. In the end, Hell be the one to kill him. The scene shifts to the next day. They finally stop to rest, bit and check their supplies. Audrey asks what the next part of the plan is, because unfortunately, the boy's head is still open. Gunther, though, says to let Arian rest a little. She collapsed. Then he asked the question, how do you even fix someone's head? He'd never thought about it before, but yeah, it's possible, right? Of course it is. The whole tat-tat thing is already stitched together. That's what he's asking. Can you fix my eyes? I can't fight like this. She tells him something he needs to know. Luckily, his brain wasn't damaged at all, so they just need to put on a new cover. His face will be fine. The only real issue is the eye. And sure enough, when he looks around, everyone is distorted, their heads huge. He mutters that something's off, everyone looks big-headed. Arian explains that the eye is the most complex part to rebuild for his body, and in a rush, this was the best they could do. He snaps at her to move back, saying it looks like a balloon, and she explains that his right eye is closed and not functioning because it was so complex they had to give up. Specifically, the connections are almost impossible. Too many nerves, too tiny, and with their crude tools, there's no way to do it properly. Gunther demands to know how he's supposed to fight like this. He even suggests taking someone else's eye and putting it in his face. Audrey says maybe they have a few spare eyes and they'll try their best. She asks if he can see with the one they put in, and he says no, not at all, nothing. They try another one, which looks like it's from a vampire. The thing spins around wildly. They insert another, and he says now he's seeing 8 of everything. Another one, nothing. Another, still nothing. She admits they tried all of them, and none worked. The real problem is, if they keep stalling here, Nesh will catch up. Better to keep moving and try to find a new eye along the way. So they carry on, but even a rabbit hopping across nearly makes him stumble. Stones tumble down beside them, and he panics. Ariane explains it's just a small mountainside, rocks falling, nothing to fear. She promises she'll warn him. Still, she can't understand why he looks so shaken. He explains that from the moment he was born, he's been surrounded by people who wanted him dead. He could barely sleep, always afraid of a knife in the back. For someone who spent his whole life alert, watching every place, every moment, losing his vision feels like the entire world wants him dead, and he can still see, clear as day, the one person who wanted him dead more than anyone else, the one who brought him into this world and was the first to wish for his death. He presses a hand to his face, and Arian clasps it, telling him to stay calm. His vision will return soon, but until then, he can trust her. She won't let the darkness come near him. She says he can trust her. He answers that hell try. And just like that, look at this romance. I just don't know if I like the romance in this story, because I'm sure everyone is going to die and get screwed over. In other words, it'll be more tragedy than romance. Then Arian mentions there's a river up ahead, and when Gunther dips his hoof in, he pulls back immediately. A little later, they have to jump over some branches, and both of them fall, flat on their faces right into manure. They keep going through deserts at night, forests by day, and snow, always side by side, hands clasped. Once again, he gets startled, and she reassures him. It's just another rabbit. She glances up and says the night sky looks beautiful, like pearls scattered across the Black Sea. He answers that maybe it really is beautiful, while Audrey watches the two of them closely. That's when Audrey calls out to Gunther, saying she has to ask. She can't hold it in any longer. His attitude toward Arian seems to have changed, and sure enough, she goes straight for it. Do you like Arian? He stops to think and suddenly lets out a confused yell. Clearly, Gunther doesn't even know what liking someone means. All his life, he's only killed and been killed. He wonders about it while Arian cuts in, telling Audrey to shut up and asking what kind of weird question that is. Out of nowhere, Gunther turns all brooding, saying there's no way to know if he loves someone because he doesn't even understand what love is. Then he clarifies, slashing at the air as he insists they're getting it wrong. Hes with Arian because if she dies, he dies. That's the only reason he has to protect her. But if he could keep living without her, he honestly wouldn't care. Audrey looks awkward, standing near one of the doctors, who wants to know why she even asked such a thing. The next scene shifts to Velvet being fed. He says today's blood was delicious, and he's already looking forward to the next meal. Audrey thinks to herself that she never imagined this would be one of the problems they'd have to deal with. having to feed this spoiled brat every 2 days. The protagonist mutters that it's strange. He thought high-ranking vampires didn't even need blood, and now they're basically dragging along a walking blood bag for this guy. Audrey explains that they need blood while fighting or recovering. Velvet adds that in war, the most important thing is supply. That's why vampires always carried blood packs with them. Audrey finds that odd, and Velvet explains that carrying around a live human was far too risky. You never know what they might do or when they might die. And even if you fed them, sometimes they'd just drop dead anyway. That's why they came up with a new method, creating a kind of human food box. A supply that could last for quite a while. Audrey demands that he explain. Velvet refuses, saying their relationship isn't close enough for him to share everything. Gunther stretches out his arm toward him, but this time Velvet says it's part of the royal family's pride. No matter how much they torture him, he won't say. Besides, he adds, they're nothing more than a death mite and a human battery. He's heard talk of things like that and wants to know how a death mite is actually created. He begins to ask if they use a certain method, but Arian shuts him down, reminding him that they have the right to keep their own secrets, and he'd better not forget the nature of their relationship. Velvet says fine, but it catches Gunther's attention. By now, they're on their 32nd eye transplant. This one, in theory, should be the best so far. It's the freshest and about the same size as his old one. He opens it and sees things slightly blurry, but much clearer than before. Everyone celebrates, and one of the doctors explains that the donor's name was Doric, a 28-year-old who'd been Gunther's friend for 10 years. But he'd been severely injured in those battles and died that morning. His dream was to become a hero who could help save the world, and in a way, he did become part of it all. He asks Gunther if Hell remember his name. Gunther just replies that Hell, try maybe, sounding like he's trying to play the good guy, even though he doesn't care about anything. With that, the carriage keeps moving. 414 kilometers remain until they reach their destination. So they did slow down, but at that pace, they'd eventually get there. The only problem is that Audrey is starving, practically bleeding from hunger. The only things they've eaten these past days were 1 or 2 scraps of dried meat. She thinks it's ironic that Velvet, that brat, is eating better than they are. They've come too far without resting, and all she wants is to drink, eat a little, and take a warm bath. At that moment, one of the men in the group points out 2 people ahead. They walk right into a noble-looking man and a peasant woman who say it's been a long time since they've seen other humans. They compliment them for surviving and ask if they'd like to spend some time in their village. Doesn't sound strange at all, right? Arian immediately questions why there's a village in the middle of a battlefield, and why these two's clothes are so spotless. Who exactly are they? The odd pair glance at each other and start laughing. Clearly, something is off in their heads. They apologize for not introducing themselves sooner and explain that after countless sacrifices and experiments, they found a way to survive against the vampires. Now they want to share their solution with everyone. Audrey wants to know how that works. The man tells her to come to the village, and there he'll explain everything. They're lucky enough to have found them, but the camera keeps focusing on their creepy expressions. Thankfully, Gunther immediately says they're talking nonsense. Obviously, it's some trick, and why would they believe that just to invite more problems? Arian agrees and asks who wants to keep moving forward. Naturally, all the soldiers say it's better to keep going straight and not get involved with these strangers. Audrey, however, plays the fool and says they're running out of supplies and will starve before they make it. Yeah, that's a problem. But she's being naive, believing these people who claim they know how to survive against vampires. Now the hungrier members of the group start pointing out that the strangers have clean clothes, look well fed, and everyone else is starving. Gunther tells them to just stick to catching rabbits along the way. But they argue, how are so many people supposed to survive on a few rabbits here and there? Then one of them suddenly shouts to get everyone's attention. A lot of calendar are coming. Someone was running toward them, dragging a horde of hands, screaming in desperation that it wasn't enough. Gunther instantly says they've wasted too much time already. It's time to run. But another man says Gunther might be able to escape, though not everyone will make it out alive. The suspicious, noble-looking guy chimes in, saying they can head to the village nearby. There, no one worries about vampires, they just need to follow him. The people who are against it realize they don't have much choice, and so they end up going through a massive gate that closes behind them. Strangely, it almost looked alive somehow. Gunther asks Arian if she saw that. She says yes, that thing is anything but normal. At the entrance of a cave, the man assures them that vampires don't enter there, and even if they do, they don't have the courage to go deeper. They just need to follow this path to a perfect place full of food. Suspicious, but with no other option, they continue. Inside, villagers are standing around, clapping and shouting, "Good job, good job." Gunther finds it odd. On top of that, the place is full of tunnels and branching paths, making it hard to know exactly where they're heading. It feels almost like an ant colony. Sometime later, they arrive in an area filled with water. There are openings in the ceiling that look like they're meant to let in sunlight, and some patches of crops too. The man then reveals a banquet they prepared. Arian immediately thinks it's suspicious, and Gunther orders no one to eat, since they don't know what any of it is made from. But Audrey has already sat down and started eating. At least the man offering the food eats it as well, reassuring them that everything there is produced right in this place. As they can see, they've got sunlight coming in, water flowing through. They grow basic crops, and even manage to raise small animals. What they need most right now are more workers, so he's thrilled that so many people have arrived. Arian points out that while the place is big, it doesn't seem natural or man-made, and she sees nothing special that would keep vampires out. So why aren't they being invaded? The man closes his eyes and says he understands her reaction, and it makes sense. They themselves don't really know why vampires never enter. They just fled here once and found a space where they could survive. It's cozy, almost as if Mother Nature herself is embracing them. Then he points at Gunther, saying he must be the death mite he's heard about in rumors. Surely they're on their way to kill a pure-blood vampire. But what are the odds of success? Why risk their lives for that? Why not just stay here and live peacefully? Arian refuses, but asks for supplies. One of the plague doctors at the front asks how the man can be so sure they can stay. Another doctor warns him not to say such things, but the man answers that the whole reason they're following the Death Knight is to kill that vampire so everyone else can live. And yet it's clearly a suicide mission. They're barely halfway there, and more than 20 are already dead. One soldier agrees, saying this place seems perfect for living safely. Another speaks up from the back, saying he isn't here to die and become just another piece of the Death Knight. This place really does look like a better option. Gunther immediately mutters that this is going to be tough to get out of, and asks Arian if she memorized the exit. She says she remembers, but unfortunately it won't be easy to bring the carriage out. He asks how that particular body is coming along, and she replies that some parts are ready. Just then, Audrey glances back and sees blocks falling into place, forming a wall like on Fortnite. Gunther instantly realizes the whole place is alive, like a real living colony. He orders the man leading them to explain what this place actually is. But the guy just keeps smiling with that same unsettling face. Considering the amount of power at work here, Gunther is sure this place was built by vampires. Now the real question is this a blood farm? Probably. What else would vampires want from humans? That would explain it. No other vampires invade because they know this is likely the territory of a stronger one. That's his bet, make yours. The man says there's no need to fight vampires outside. They can live here, join the farm, and be at peace. All they have to do is one small thing for the community. When they ask what, he says it's nothing difficult. Just follow him, and they'll learn the secret to staying in this place. Of course, the group is suspicious. Gunther pounds on the carriage, demanding that explain what this place really is. Velvet asks what he's talking about. He has no idea. They stumbled upon it by chance. Gunther warns him to stop playing dumb or hell be killed. That's when Velvet says he's tired of hiding. Here it comes. He asks if Gunther remembers when he mentioned that vampires carry little lunchboxes into war. And this was the place where they manufactured those blood boxes that kept vampires full for a while. Now everyone's staring at this giant spider. That looks more like some twisted ant. They're all asking what the hell this is and why a vampire is here. The leader tells them not to be afraid. The vampire hidden there is named Linnell. This whole marvelous place was built out of parts of her body. They protect her and keep her warm with all the love they can give. All they need to do in return is show benevolent love to the queen. The soldiers immediately snap at him to stop joking. The goal of vampires is to wipe out humanity, so why would this one be looking after them? The man calmly says that makes sense. and that's why they chose to live in a symbiotic way. Velvet explains further, she needs the blood of 6 different people, and by draining them all at once and mixing it in her digestive system, she can produce what are essentially their little food boxes. The soldiers watch in disgust as the strange mass drops to the ground and demand to know what it is. The man explains it's a blood orb. That thing can be stored for over 2 months without rotting, and consuming just one means a vampire won't need blood for 3 months. In this place, everyone works hard, so the queen can produce more of these. The knights tremble, demanding to know why they're making food for vampires who will just use that energy to slaughter humans. Now it all makes sense. That's why so many vampires outside the walls still have power, even without humans to kill. The man laughs and asks, so what? He isn't killing anyone by doing this. And even if he were, the only thing that matters is that he himself survives. He doesn't care how many die outside, as long as he's safe. That's all that counts. The knights shout for him to wake up. This won't last forever. The vampire's end goal is to erase the community entirely, and once that happens, Hell be killed too. The leader admits that makes sense, but asks how long it will take for everyone outside to die anyway. 5 years, 10, maybe 100. In the end, Hell already be dead too. But at least Hell have lived a peaceful life. Better to choose now stay here with everyone, or spend every day begging for life out there. Back at the carriage, the group is saying this place is far too dangerous. Better to be chased by Nesh than trapped here. Right then they hear screaming. Turning, they see men stumbling, and covered in blood, saying it's a shame. They needed more workers, but now everyone is dead. Since the truth has been discovered, obviously no one can leave. What if they bring more people here? Too bad, this is the end for them. Because as long as she's inside their queen's belly, they're invincible. Suddenly, the ceiling starts closing in. Audrey comments that they're trying to shroud everything in darkness, and someone shouts to light a torch. The soldiers are trembling when the first flame sparks, and the man reassures them it's fine. But in that exact moment, another 5 or 6 come rushing from behind him. The old guy squeezes his eyes shut in terror, then turns to ask what that noise is, only to see Gunther tearing everyone apart. Hare's laughing, cutting 3, 4 of them down in a single sweep. One stomp crushes another. He punches one so hard, the body explodes against its allies. The enemies throw machetes, trying to blindside him, but Gunther steps forward, blocking everything, telling them Hell show them how throwing is really done. He hurls one back, slicing 3, 4 in a single shot. He says it's laughable that they call themselves immortals when they die like idiots. At least now they won't need anyone else to work, since not a single one of them will be left standing. The tribe leader mutters that this is a problem. The Blood Knight is far stronger than they expected. But it wasn't a lie. They really were invincible. The problem was, he seemed to forget that they were inside the Queen's body. At that moment, the entire ground began to shift. Audrey pointed out that from the very beginning, it was obvious this whole place was alive. Gunther noticed everything around them closing in, constantly regenerating. It wasn't killing him, but it was limiting his movements, and it didn't look like there was any way to break through those walls. He could escape on his own, sure, but he wouldn't be able to take anyone else with him. One of the soldiers shouted for everyone to look. The entrance they had come from was closing. Immediately, Gunther dashed forward, declaring that he was taking everyone with him, already dragging the carriages toward the exit. They tried to pick up speed, but the walls shifted and paths closed. Gunther, hauling the carriage at full force, managed to push through first, followed by one more. The last was trapped behind, its passengers screaming. The others wondered what was happening, while Gunther just barked at Aryan to show him the rest of the path. They pressed on as he shouted that he was going full speed. The place kept changing, walls rearranging, but the entrances seemed to remain the same. Then, out of nowhere, a machete slammed into Gunther's leg. Figures appeared, sneering, asking if he really thought he could escape. They were all part of the Queen's body. Dozens of them emerged around her, smiling, chanting that he wasn't leaving. The protagonists spat back that they were a bunch of disgusting freaks. Clearly, none of them were truly alive. The leader said if 2 or 3 blades weren't enough, then how about dozens at once? Steel rained down, stabbing deep into the iron carriage. Inside, the others cried out, desperate to know if Gunther was alive. He was. He'd even caught one blade in his teeth to shield his face, though his body was pinned full of steel. The enemies couldn't believe he'd survived, but at that moment, one of his allies was torn apart. Gunther laughed, growling that they'd regret giving him so much ammunition, then pushed forward, taunting them. If they thought they could stop him, they could come try. Aryan warned that they should have taken the left path, not the right. He only snapped back that it was too late to change now. This was the route they'd take. Audrey demanded to know why he was provoking everyone, but Gunther was more focused on figuring out how to shift his weight. His left side had taken the worst damage, worse than expected. His leg was shredded and barely moving. But at times like this, you provoke your enemy even harder. It's the only way to distract them and keep them from noticing your injuries. Because a wounded beast is the easiest prey. The creatures kept attacking with wave after wave of cleavers, from who knew where, screaming that his death would mean victory for the vampires. They had already abandoned humanity, so now they would serve these monsters. But in the middle of their speech, they were split in half, with Gunther smiling and telling them to go to hell. The real problem was that the path kept getting narrower and narrower, making it harder to squeeze the carriages through. One had to be abandoned. The survivors continued on foot. But then Gunther's wounded leg finally gave out, snapping beneath him, and the carriage nearly tipped over. Aryan cried out, asking if he was all right. He gritted his teeth and said if his movement weren't so restricted, he would have torn them all apart already. Worse still, they had just passed what looked like an exit, only to slam into another wall. One soldier warned they were trapped, with nowhere left to go. Gunther asked if there was any way to destroy it and open a path, but the man shook his head. It was impossible. This place regenerated far faster than he could ever carve through, and just as they were stuck in that chamber with only a small opening, the others outside were hesitating. In the end, they were human too, and they knew the first ones to try getting through would be torn apart by Gunther. The girl hesitated, but the man told her to relax. Everyone here risked their lives for each other. The leader then spoke up, saying there was no reason to worry. That was an exit right there. They had no food and no water. Time was on their side. He shouted to his people, telling them the offer still stood. Anyone who wanted to live could come join them. Why throw your life away for others when you could save yourself? He was laughing like a madman, while everyone on the other side was left confused. Gunther said he needed a new weapon. What did they have that he could equip to get out of this place quickly? Aryan explained they had a torso, a pair of legs, another pair of legs, and finally, yet another pair of legs. Gunther demanded to know what the hell that was supposed to mean. Were they trying to turn him into a centipede? Audrey paused, then admitted maybe it wasn't such a bad idea. He was baffled, while the cave dwellers sat in silence, waiting for something to happen. The red bald one muttered that they were holding out longer than expected. The leader simply replied that it didn't matter. Time was on their side. That was when Gunther's voice suddenly sounded in his ear, telling him to repeat that. The man jolted and stumbled back, demanding to know where this freak came from. He shouldn't have been able to break through that wall. But there was Gunther, equipped with 8 legs, saying it was incredible. Now it was time to tear them all apart and make them regret it. The guy couldn't understand how he was moving so fast. But in that same instant, Gundar slammed a kick straight into his chin. He even said the most important thing in this world was his own life. We then flash back a little too, when they were training him to move with all those bizarre legs. Some even looked like they came from a rhinoceros. He stumbled awkwardly, and Audrey told him to focus. He snapped back that she had no idea how weird this felt. Aryan explained that this set of legs was designed after studying insect anatomy. In theory, he could climb any mountain and cling to any slippery surface. In just a second, he was scaling everything, boasting that with this speed and reach, no one could get near him. Not to mention, he could morph the legs into something, like a scorpion tail strike. He even swung an attack toward Aryan, joking that she would have died right there, though it only brushed her lightly. She said at least this way, he had an advantage. The real problem, though, was how they would escape this labyrinth. He brushed it off. Why escape? All he had to do was kill the queen within 2 hours. Audrey admitted that was an option, but reminded him the place was a maze. How would he even find her? Gunther simply answered that he would find himself a reliable guide to lead the way. And with that, he charged ahead at full speed, seizing the human leader by the throat and demanding to know where the queen was. The man refused at first, until Gunther started crushing his skull. Then he blurted out that the queen was to the right. The other villagers shouted at him not to say a word, warning that if he did, the queen would be killed. But obviously, the man was more concerned with staying alive. Meanwhile, I hadn't noticed they had abandoned Velvet's carriage. Some people were trying to free him when suddenly something darted past at blinding speed. Velvet wondered what kind of strange creature that was. Gunther, still racing forward, snarled at his hostage to keep talking, point out the exit or his head would burst. The man quickly told him to turn left. Survivors rushed in with cleavers to attack from behind, but Gunther lashed them aside with his tail and bolted forward so fast they couldn't do a thing. Even as he was dragged along, the leader insisted Gunther wouldn't be able to break through the final defense. The queen's mouth was right ahead, but Gunther launched himself forward, and as her teeth snapped shut, he shot through like a bullet. He muttered that this was interesting. Now playtime was over. He was already inside the queen's chamber, while the others panicked, shouting that if she died, they would lose the fortress. At that moment, the leader finally realized the truth. If this place fell, the vampires outside would slaughter everyone. The problem was that they didn't have the strength to stop this other monster, Gunther, who already knew all their secrets. It was all his fault for miscalculating and bringing these people here. At this rate, they would all end up dead no matter what. He looked at Gunther and broke down, crying, begging for forgiveness, telling the knight he had risked his life so many times just to bring him to this chamber. Gunther was left confused as the man sobbed like a child, begging for his life and promising he would serve humanity forever, swearing that all he wanted was to live. The others began dropping their cleavers, falling to their knees as well, weeping and begging for mercy, admitting that everyone makes bad choices, but all they ever wanted was to survive. Gunther laughed, saying they were adorable. He loved selfish people like them, who acted purely on instinct, because he was the same way. And fine, he would show some mercy. He would give them all a second chance. If they ran right now and stabbed the queen in, the heart, the first 10 to do it, would be spared. The rest would die. For a moment, they hesitated. The next, they were on their feet, shouting that they were fighting for humanity. They all charged at the queen, and then she began peeling back her mask, staring straight at them. Obviously, she wasn't going to die that easily without resisting, and before anyone could pity her, we were shown what turned her into this monster. The woman remembered a family holding a baby and weeping. A hand landed on her shoulder, and someone told her it was a shame the second wife had borne better children than hers. She looked aside and apologized deeply to her mother. Her mother snapped back that she had better not forget. Everything they owned had been invested into this marriage with that duke. They had sacrificed everything to seize the royal bloodline and the power that came with it, even if it meant marrying the trash that was her father. All the hard work she'd done her entire life. She had better not forget it. The daughter just stood there, replying that she understood, but mother kept turning her face away, yelling that she understood nothing about the sacrifices that had been made. Why did she have to fail when they were so close to getting what they wanted? Why couldn't she just produce an heir? The girl, cross-eyed and broken, whispered that she didn't know either. She had married a man she didn't even like, just to please her mother. She was living in this foreign land, giving her all, surrounded by strangers she'd never met. All she wanted was for her mother, the only person she knew, to treat her like a daughter. Instead, her mother slapped her, saying failures didn't deserve affection. She was a useless girl. Her mother turned to leave, and the daughter asked if she had only been born to fulfill her mother's ambitions and greed. Was she nothing but a tool to bear children and secure ties to that noble house? Her mother turned back and coldly confirmed, yes, she had finally understood. Now that she knew the truth, she had better make herself useful somehow. The daughter boiled with hatred inside but held her tongue. Then she told her mother that if her only purpose was to give birth to something, then so be it. She would create something, not the noble blood her mother craved, but something that would bring an end to humanity's suffering. And he snapped back to the fight, with Linnell declaring that she still cannot die. She still hadn't given birth to whatever was meant to bring about the end of humanity once and for all. My theory? Maybe she's trying to create a new version of that woman buried with Julius. Honestly, that's one of the few things that would make sense. And then, out of nowhere, the entire forest erupts in an explosion, with her escaping and muttering that it's still too soon. The humans, meanwhile, rush after her, shouting that Gunther only promised to spare the first 10, so they would be first. They piled onto each other's backs, trying to get ahead, when suddenly something sliced through them all. It was Nesh, announcing that he had found plenty of fists. Everyone turned to run, while Gunther's soldiers remarked that at least they had managed to escape that place. The protagonist then showed up carrying Velvet, saying he had found what he was looking for and it was time to leave. The fool kept demanding to be treated with respect, but Gunther just threw him to the ground and ordered them to lock that trash up again. At the same time, the human leader was ordering one of his men not to block his path, only to get punched in the mouth and told to go to hell. He staggered up to curse back, but heard a sound behind him. It was Nesh, saying he still had a few fists left to collect. The leader stood, apparently recognizing him, and tried to bargain. He told Nesh not to worry, that he would help him meet his quota. Just tell him how many are needed, and this humble servant will gather them all. All he wanted was for their lives to be spared, but Nesh kept closing in. The leader asked what he was doing, only to be ripped apart, eaten alive, and torn in half, until nothing remained but hands. Meanwhile, Gunther was sprinting at full speed, carrying the carriages on his 3 legs. Inside, they whispered that he must have known all along what was happening in that production nest. Audrey, on the other hand, told the fools that they deserved to die there, but at least now they had bought everyone more time. One of the men insisted, him going back to kill Linnell, but Gunther snapped that they didn't have time. Facing 2 high-ranked demons at once would be impossible. He would burn out completely. And besides, now that her nest was destroyed, a blood-spewing monster wouldn't be able to do anything. Still, Lin all herself was staggering through the forest, muttering that it hadn't been born yet. She still hadn't given birth to what she needed. Sometime later, one of the soldiers riding on top of the carriage lost consciousness and fell to the ground. Immediately, the others shouted for Gunther to stop. They needed to help him. Sir Eric said he hadn't slept in 3 days. It was far too much. On top of that, he was starving. Gunther sneered that the guy was a failure. But Yubi began to feel his own energy draining and decided to stop for an hour. Inside the carriage, Galvent muttered that humans were failures. Victory was so close. After all, they had destroyed the vampire's energy source. And here they were, hesitating. Only 112 miles remained, and all they had to do was keep moving. The others mostly ignored him. The focus shifted to Gunther feeding Arian, who clearly wasn't in the mood. He ordered her to eat, but she insisted there were others who might need more. Gunther snapped, furious, demanding that she eat more than 5 spoonfuls. If she collapsed, he collapsed too. She tried to protest, but he shoved the spoon into her mouth, telling her to shut up and eat. If he didn't, he would kill her himself. Audrey remarked that they were such a romantic couple, but the man beside her shook his head, saying he didn't think that was the case. Gunther looked around and pointed out that only 10 remained. Compared to how many had left the walls, it was a devastating decline. He asked Ariane if she was sure this part of the plan would even work. Doubt spread through the group. As much as he didn't want to quit, he also didn't want to throw his life away for nothing. Gunther heard this and said no one would die in vain, because even if everyone else died, their deaths would serve as fuel to keep him alive. In other words, the plan would work as long as he was still standing. One of the men replied that if the plan relied on Gunther's sheer will to survive, somehow that actually made him feel more relieved. The carriage was back on the road, with the protagonist charging at full speed, while the group caught rabbits and ate whatever they could find. Another gate passed, and Velvet announced there were only 61 miles left. It was an incredible feat for mortals. Their journey was nearly at its end. It was just a shame that, of course, Ishu showed up. Suddenly, a figure in a hat appeared in front of them, and it was Julius. He looked at Gunther and said he must be the Death Knight. Everyone immediately recognized him. Demanding to know what he was doing here, Julius told them to calm down. There was no need to be afraid. He had come in peace. He admitted he had failed to feel sympathy for their ambitions, but he was doing his best to show compassion. And through that, he had realized the Death Knight was making the wrong choice. Because the moment mortals won this war against humans, that wanted to kill him and the so-called immortal knight. Gunther demanded to know what he was talking about, and Julius finally made the offer everyone expected. Mortals would not grant Gunther his true desire. Julius would. That was why he asked if Gunther was willing to hear him out. Gunther frowned, not understanding, while Audrey yelled that it was a trap, but he snapped at her to shut up. He would be the one to judge whether it was a trap or not. He ordered Julius to spit it out. If it was a joke, he would kill him right now. Julius answered with the obvious. Gunther was only being kept alive because they needed him as a weapon. But once the war ended, a weapon would no longer be necessary. Whether it was the survivor, the new king, or the true hound, someone would want him dead because he was a dangerous variable. Gunther paused, deep in thought. Audrey kept insisting he should ignore it, that Julius was just spouting nonsense. But Gunther ignored her and asked, how would he survive? Julius said that before that, he needed to talk to the boy. First, it was uncertain whether the boy or Gunther himself would die in this fight. Vampires were the closest thing mortals had ever come to calling death. That was why he wanted to understand the will of everyone here, just as he wanted them to understand his will. Gunther was completely lost, demanding to know what this lunatic was going on about. Julius then explained the plans he had. He wanted to be the first to do something no short-lived mortal had ever done, truly understand one another. The knights all stared at each other, confused. They knew the man in front of them was Julius. Audrey, however, muttered that no matter how she looked at it, this was a trap. Aryan warned they should strike first, when suddenly Julius brought up Gunther's parents. Just like any being in this world, he too had been born from someone. But his father, staring at his son, once said that life was boring. Then he walked outside and let himself burn alive. Those were his last words before stepping out and dying in the sunlight, just as his mother had done. Gunther watched his father crumble to ash, yet he felt nothing. That was the sensation of immortality. Every day, hundreds of creatures were born and died before his eyes. Each one left traces that became part of the earth. But unlike humans, vampires left nothing behind. They vanished completely. The moment he realized there was nothing left worth living for the next day, he chose to sleep for eternity. Some humans walked through the catacombs carrying the king, who approached a coffin and admitted it was true. There really was a pure-blood vampire sealed in this place. It was something he had searched for his entire life, and finally, God had given him the chance to reclaim his youth, along with the world. But when the king opened his eyes again, his head had been severed, blood spilled, yet in that very same moment, it vanished. The king screamed in desperation, demanding to know why it couldn't be preserved. He didn't want to live a life where he had to keep this creature imprisoned and live in fear. The man beside him explained that nothing of a pure-blood vampire remained once it left their body. The king said he already knew that, but he wanted them to find a solution, because his eternal youth would disappear the moment this vampire truly died. Without it, it would be the end of the nation. He was the one protecting all, of humanity, the master of this world. One of his servants pulled back his hood and suggested that the king try absorbing pure parts of the demon, exactly what he had already been considering, feeding on its fingers, its feet, and everything else. The king insisted he was doing it, all for the sake of humanity. Did he bite into everything? Apparently so, but even after chewing up the vampire's flesh, nothing worked. There were no results. Standing before a mirror, he asked himself what more he had to do to become a perfect being of eternal life. The servant then told him there was only one part left, the riskiest but most effective, the pure-blood vampire's source of power, the heart. The king licked his lips, thinking of the eternal source, of endless vitality. It was the only thing that, once completely destroyed, thinking of the eternal source, of endless vitality. It was the only thing that, once completely destroyed, maybe even cut in half, maybe into thirds or even quarters. No one dared take that risk, though, since they all wanted Julius to stay alive. So the king carved out a tiny piece to devour. He lifted the plate, ate it, and declared that it tasted like perfect vitality. It was delicious. But that small piece of heart didn't grant him eternal life. Instead, it only fueled his hunger even more. He began consuming larger and larger pieces each time, until at last he had eaten half of Julius' heart. The king screamed, demanding more and more, while the strange servant who had suggested it all stood silently watching. The scene then shifted to Julius opening his eyes. Someone whispered that he had finally awakened. The girl before him said that having his head cut off for 900 years must have left his memory fractured. But throughout all that time, he had been used as nothing more than a tool by humanity. Countless humans had fed on his blood, and all she wanted was to beg forgiveness on behalf of every single one of them. She said she was willing to die by his hands if it would ease his pain. All she asked was that he forgive humanity. Julius, however, only asked who she was. The soldier beside him declared that he was in the presence of the most benevolent and noble princess to ever exist, the true Queen Isabella. But she cut him off, saying he was wrong. She was nothing more than another sinful human. Julius replied that he had already known. He knew humans had been drinking his blood and chewing his heart piece by piece. Yet he held no resentment or hatred for what they had done to him. Because long ago, life had already lost its meaning. Outside the cabin, Isabella explained that they had built this place far from anyone. As long as she lived, she would stay by his side, protecting him so he would never again fall into human hands. Julius, still confused, asked why she was going so far for him. She only answered that she was certain if she hadn't done it, eventually someone else would have. Time passed, and she told him she had brought another book. It seemed to be one of the most beloved among humans. She asked if he wanted her to read it. He told her to do as she pleased. More time passed, books piled up, and she began to grow old. Then one night, she cried out in panic, saying this place had been discovered and they needed to move somewhere safer. He said it was fine, and that if it was her wish, he would follow. In the carriage, Julius only watched her face, etched with fear. They traveled for days and nights. At one point, the mustached knight told the queen that unfortunately they had no money and no allies left. If she allowed it, he wanted to spend the last days of his life with his family. She thanked him for everything he had done, until now. Later, Isabella told Julius that spending her life serving someone as extraordinary as him had been wonderful. But sadly, her time was ending, and he would be left alone when she died. Julius replied that for the first time in 100 years, he had a dream. In that dream, they grew old together while their children became adults. In the end, they were buried side by side while their children gathered around their grave. Isabella answered that maybe dreams were impossible by nature. It was then that Julius found his purpose in life. He wished that the day Isabella drew her final breath would be the day he ended his own immortality. But that dream never came true. They were still in the cabin, and when Julius told her she had 1 year, that was the limit before her death. Isabella only asked if he would stay by her side after she was gone. He told her yes, he would remain with her in the coffin where she would be buried. Isabella then asked that, if that was his wish, they should be buried somewhere no one could ever find them. He agreed, since it was her desire. That night, Julius dreamed again. In his dream, he was buried deep in the cold earth, unable to breathe. Yet he didn't feel suffocated or uncomfortable, because Isabella was beside him. He could feel her flesh decomposing, insects feeding on her body. Even so, for the first time, he felt at peace. And as his own body fell apart, it was slowly absorbed into the soil. He began to wake from the dream, but as he turned to the side, someone spoke, carrying words from the King of Kings. Humans are idiots, because they believe the ridiculous sense of justice they cling to will never betray them. The man had driven a sword into Isabella. Immediately he pulled it free and tossed her into the snow, saying the former princess was worthless. Their task was to hunt the pureblood vampire. They advanced toward Julius, who simply glared back and ripped them all apart in a single strike. He walked to Isabella, telling her that her fermenting spirit was too dangerous. He knew this wasn't how she wished to die. He could spare her from death by turning her into a high-ranking vampire, if that was her desire. He leaned in to bite, promising she would gain eternal life by drinking mortal blood, but she asked him to stop. Over time, she had learned that humans didn't grow wiser with age, only greedier. She begged his forgiveness, but said that, unfortunately, she wanted to leave everything behind and let destiny take its course. Looking at her hand, she confessed her only regret was not accomplishing one thing before death, something she had never been able to see. Julius told her to just ask. If she wanted everyone who had done this to her dead, or the entire royal family destroyed, he would make it happen. But Isabella said that what she wished to see one day was a world where no human suffered because of another's greed. Julius then gave her his word. One day, the world she wished for would be created. She then placed her hand on his face and told him he was still her beloved, melancholic god. And with that, Isabella died. We return to the present. with Julius saying that after her death, he spent years and years researching ways to create a world without greed. That was when he discovered that mortals had a unique trait. They were social creatures, ones who naturally worked together to survive. The problem was that selfishness and greed always tangled with those intentions. If there was any species on this planet born to torture one another in the name of survival, it was mortals. That was when he concluded that for a world without suffering to exist, humanity itself could no longer exist, because they were the very cause of greed and of the like on this video.